My name is Rose Parker. That man over there is my son, Daniel Parker. And I will defend my son myself because no one else will tell the truth.
Every mother's prayer is not to see her son go to jail. However, for 65-year-old Rose, her only son was about to be incarcerated until she did the unthinkable. The courtroom fell, dead silent. Every person held their breath as they watched a 65-year-old woman with mid-length brown hair walk toward the front. Her shoes clicked against the wooden floor with each determined step. She wore a simple red dress that hung elegantly on her frame, and in her trembling hands, she clutched a worn folder against her chest like armor. Judge Harrison, an older man with silver-gray hair and piercing eyes, sat behind his tall wooden desk. His black judge's robe seemed to absorb all the light around him as he looked down at the woman with raised eyebrows. "Ma'am, what are you doing? Sit down. This is a serious court proceeding." "Your Honor," the woman interrupted, her voice shaking but clear. "My name is Rose Parker. That man over there is my son, Daniel Parker." She pointed to a thin, tired-looking man in an old gray suit sitting at the defendant's table. His shoulders were hunched forward as if carrying an invisible weight. "And I will defend my son myself, because no one else will tell the truth." The entire courtroom erupted. People gasped and whispered loudly. Some even stood up from their seats, pointing and staring. "Order! Order in my courtroom!" Judge Harrison banged his gavel hard. The sharp crack silenced everyone instantly. Mr. James, the prosecutor in his expensive tailored suit, jumped up with an amused smile playing on his lips. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. This woman should be removed immediately." "I have proof," Rose shouted, holding up her folder. "Proof that my son is innocent. Proof that shows who really stole the money." Complete silence fell again. Judge Harrison stared at her with narrowed eyes. The prosecutor's smile vanished. Daniel, Rose's son, had tears streaming down his face. "Rose, Mom, you don't have to do this," Daniel whispered. Rose turned to him, her own eyes wet with tears. "Yes, I do, son. If the grown-ups won't fight for you, then I will." The judge took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Finally, he looked at Rose again. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "do you understand what you're saying? Your son is accused of stealing $5 million. Very smart lawyers have looked at this case. The evidence against him is extremely strong." "The evidence is fake," Rose said, her voice steady now, "and I can prove it." Another collective gasp filled the room. Judge Harrison leaned forward, studying the woman's determined face. Something in her eyes made him pause. After a long moment, he spoke. "I've been a judge for 32 years, and I've never done this before, but I'm going to let you speak." He pointed at Mr. Roberts, Daniel's nervous lawyer. "You'll help her present her evidence properly." Mr. James stood up, his face flushed red. "Your Honor, I object. This is against all procedures." "Objection noted. Sit down, Mr. James." The judge's voice was firm. "This is my courtroom." Rose felt relief wash over her. She turned to her son one last time. Daniel smiled through his tears. The first real smile she'd seen in months. His lips moved silently. "I love you." Rose wiped her tears and faced the judge again. "Your Honor," she said, opening her folder, "I need to tell you about my son, about who he really is, about what really happened, and about the person who destroyed our lives." The courtroom was silent. Every eye was on the determined woman with the worn folder and the brave heart. "Hello, friends. Welcome to our story." Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also, tell us in the comments where you're watching from: New York, Texas, California, or Florida. We want to know. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, before the courtroom drama, before the accusations, before Rose Parker became known as the mother who took on the system. Rose and her son, Daniel, lived in a small apartment on the quiet side of the city. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and a living room with furniture that had seen better days. The paint on the walls was fading, and the couch had a small tear on one side. But it was home, and they were happy there. Daniel worked as an accountant at a medium-sized company downtown. Every morning he would wake up early, make breakfast for Rose, and they would eat together before he left for work. He wore his best suits to work and always kissed Rose on the forehead before leaving. "Be good at home today, Mom," he would say with a warm smile. "I will, son. Love you," Rose would reply, hugging him tight. Rose's husband, James, had died when Daniel was only 5 years old. A car accident on a rainy night had taken him away from them forever. Rose remembered her husband's laugh and his warm hugs, but the memories were fading like old photographs left too long in the sun. Daniel kept a picture of his father on the living room shelf, a handsome man with brown hair and kind eyes, smiling at the camera. Sometimes Rose would catch her son staring at that picture with sad eyes, but whenever he noticed Rose watching, he would smile and pull her into a hug. "Dad would be so proud of the man you've become," she would whisper to him. They didn't have much money. Daniel's salary was enough to pay rent, buy food, and cover Rose's basic needs, but there wasn't much left over. Rose wore clothes from discount stores. They couldn't afford to eat at restaurants or go on vacations like other families, but Rose didn't care. Every Saturday, Daniel would take her to the public library, and they would check out books together. On Sundays, they would walk to the park with old bread and feed the ducks. Sometimes, on special occasions, Daniel would buy a small pizza, and they would eat it together while watching movies on their old television. "We don't have much, Mom," Daniel would tell her, "but we have each other, and that's worth more than all the money in the world." Rose believed him. Her son was her hero. He worked hard, he was honest, and he loved her more than anything. Every night before bed, Daniel would sit with Rose in the living room, and they would talk about their day. "What did you do today, Mom?" he would ask. Rose would tell him about the errands she ran, or the book she was reading, or the neighbors she spoke with. Daniel would listen to every word as if it was the most important thing in the world. Then he would pray with her. "Thank you for keeping us safe today. Thank you for our home and our food. Please watch over us tomorrow and always." Life was simple. Life was peaceful. Life was good. But then, 7 months ago, everything changed. It started when Daniel came home from work one evening, looking more excited than Rose had seen him in years. His eyes were bright, and he had a huge smile on his face. "Mom, guess what happened today?" he said, picking her up and spinning her around in their small living room. "What? What happened, son?" Rose laughed, holding onto his shoulders. Daniel sat her down and knelt in front of her, holding both her hands. "Remember how I told you I've been working on a big project at work? Well, my boss's business partner, Mr. Richard Stone, noticed my work. He said I'm smart and talented, and he wants to start a new business with me." Rose's eyes went wide. "Really? That's amazing, son." "Yes. Mr. Stone said we could be partners, equal partners. He'll put in the money to start the company, and I'll handle all the accounting and financial planning. If it works, we could make real money, Mom. We could move to a better apartment. I could buy you new clothes. We could save for the future." Tears of joy filled Daniel's eyes. "After all these years of struggling, finally, things are going to get better for us." Rose hugged her son tight. "I'm so proud of you, son." Over the next few weeks, Daniel worked harder than ever. He would come home late at night, tired but happy, with papers and folders under his arm. He would sit at their small kitchen table, going over numbers and contracts, while Rose prepared dinner beside him. "Son, you should rest," Rose would say, worried about how tired he looked. "I will, Mom. I just need to make sure everything is perfect," Daniel would reply, rubbing his eyes. "Mr. Stone is trusting me with a lot of money. I have to do this right." Mr. Richard Stone was a wealthy businessman in his 50s. He had carefully styled gray hair, wore expensive suits, and always had a big smile that showed his perfectly white teeth. He drove a luxury car and wore a gold watch that probably cost more than Daniel made in a year. The first time Rose met him was when he came to their apartment to discuss business with her son. "So this is your mother," Mr. Stone said, shaking Rose's hand with a firm grip. "Your son talks about you all the time, says you're the wisest woman he knows." Rose smiled shyly. "Thank you, sir." "Please, call me Richard," Mr. Stone insisted. "Your son is a very talented young man, Mrs. Parker. I'm lucky to have him as a partner." Over the following weeks, Rose noticed how much time Daniel spent working with Mr. Stone. They would have meetings at the apartment, at restaurants, at Mr. Stone's office. Daniel would come home exhausted but excited, talking about their plans for the new business. "Mom, if this works out, we'll never have to worry about money again. You can retire, you can relax. I can take care of you the way you've always taken care of me." Rose smiled, but a small worry grew in her heart. Something about Mr. Stone bothered her, though she couldn't explain what. He was always polite, always friendly, but there was something in his eyes she didn't trust, a coldness behind the warm smile. "Son," she said one evening as they sat on the couch, "are you sure about this Mr. Stone? Do you really know him well enough to go into business with him?" Daniel laughed. "Mom, you worry too much. Mr. Stone is successful and respected. He's giving me an opportunity most people only dream about. Trust me, everything is going to be fine." Rose wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that everything would work out. But mothers have instincts, and hers were screaming that something was wrong. Then one morning, everything fell apart. It was a Tuesday. Rose was making breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, Daniel's favorite, when she heard loud knocking at the door. Bang, bang, bang! The sound was aggressive, urgent. Rose hurried to open it. Daniel was already coming out of his bedroom in his pajamas, looking confused. Two police officers stood in the hallway. Their faces were serious and cold. "Daniel Parker?" one of them said. "Yes, that's me," Daniel replied, pulling his robe tighter around himself. "You're under arrest for embezzlement and theft." "What?" Daniel's face went white. "There must be some mistake." "Turn around and put your hands behind your back, sir." "No!" Rose screamed, stepping between the officers and her son. "There's been a mistake. My son would never steal anything." "Ma'am, step back," the second officer said firmly. "Your son is accused of stealing $5 million from Stone Enterprises. We have a warrant for his arrest." The words hit Rose like a punch to the stomach. $5 million. Stone Enterprises, Mr. Stone's company. "It can't be true," Daniel said, his voice shaking as the officers handcuffed him. "Mom, I didn't do this. I swear I didn't do this." The officers led Daniel away while Rose stood in the doorway, frozen in shock. Her son's voice echoed in the stairwell. "Mom, call a lawyer. Please, Mom, help me." Rose's hands were shaking so badly she could barely dial the phone. She called her sister Rachel, who came immediately. She called lawyers, but when they heard the case details, they either wanted too much money or said the evidence was too strong against Daniel. The evidence showed that money had been transferred from Stone Enterprises accounts to Daniel's personal bank account over several weeks. The transactions had Daniel's login credentials, his password, his electronic signature. Bank statements showed the money in Daniel's account. It looked clear. It looked obvious. It looked damning. But Rose knew her son. She had raised him. She had watched him grow from a little boy into a man. Daniel was honest, sometimes too honest. He would return extra change if a cashier made a mistake. He would work overtime without asking for extra pay because it was the right thing to do. Her son was not a thief. The arraignment hearing was short. Daniel stood before the judge looking terrified. The prosecutor, Mr. James, presented the evidence with confidence. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of embezzlement. The defendant systematically stole $5 million from his business partner over the course of 2 months. We have bank records, transaction logs, and digital evidence showing the defendant's involvement. Bail was set at $150,000. Rose didn't have that kind of money. Daniel was sent to the county jail to await trial." The trial date was set for 3 months away. Rose visited Daniel in jail as often as she could. They would sit across from each other with a glass partition between them, speaking through phones. "Mom," Daniel would say, tears running down his face. "I didn't do this. Someone set me up." "I know, son. I know you didn't do this." "But Mom, the evidence, how? How did someone make it look like I did it?" Rose didn't have answers, but she made her son a promise. "I'm going to figure this out, Daniel. I'm going to find out what happened. I'm going to prove you're innocent." Daniel shook his head. "Mom, you're not a lawyer. The evidence is too complicated. You can't—" "Watch me," Rose said, her voice strong and determined. "You're my son. I brought you into this world. I raised you. And I will not let someone destroy your life with lies. I will find the truth." As the day of the trial approached, Rose became more determined than ever. She had spent months investigating, learning, and preparing. She had discovered things about Mr. Stone, about the money transfers, about the evidence that no one else had noticed, and now, here she was, standing in a courtroom, ready to fight for her son's freedom, ready to expose the truth. The judge looked at her with curious eyes. "Mrs. Parker, You may proceed with your opening statement." Rose took a deep breath. The courtroom waited. The moment of truth had arrived. What would happen next? Would Rose be able to prove her son's innocence? What had she discovered during her investigation? The battle for truth and justice was about to begin. Before the courtroom drama, before the accusations, before the tears and the fear, Rose Parker and her son Daniel lived a simple but happy life. Their story began long before Mr. Stone entered their lives, and to understand the depth of Rose's determination, we must go back and see who they truly were. Rose Parker hadn't always been a single mother. 27 years ago, she had been Rose Thompson, a young woman with dreams of becoming a teacher. She had met James Parker at a community college where they both took night classes. James worked as a mechanic during the day and studied business administration at night, hoping to one day open his own auto shop. Their love story had been simple but genuine. Coffee dates at the campus cafe, walks in the park on Sunday afternoons, movie nights at James's small apartment. Within a year, they were married in a modest ceremony with family and close friends. "I don't need fancy things," Rose had told James when he apologized for not being able to afford a big wedding. "I just need you." They had moved into a small apartment, similar to the one Rose and Daniel lived in now. James continued working as a mechanic while Rose finished her teaching degree. They weren't rich, but they were happy, planning for a future together. When Daniel was born, Rose had never seen James cry so much. "He's perfect," James had whispered, holding his newborn son. "Rose, look what we made. He's absolutely perfect." For 5 years, they had been a complete family. James teaching Daniel how to throw a ball, Rose reading bedtime stories, family dinners around their small kitchen table. James had been saving money to open his own shop, and they had been looking at houses with small backyards where Daniel could play. Then came the rainy night that changed everything. James had been driving home from work. The roads were slick. Another driver ran a red light. The impact was instant and fatal. Rose's world collapsed. At 30 years old, she became a widow and a single mother to a 5-year-old boy who couldn't understand why his daddy wasn't coming home anymore. "When is Dad coming back?" Daniel would ask night after night. "Daddy isn't coming back, sweetheart," Rose would explain, holding back her own tears. "Remember what we talked about? Daddy's in heaven now." "But I want him here," Daniel would sob. "I want him to come back." "I know, baby. I want that too," Rose would whisper, holding her son close. The insurance money had helped them survive the first year, but it wasn't enough for long-term security. Rose had taken a job as a receptionist at a doctor's office, abandoning her dreams of teaching to find work with stable hours that allowed her to be there for Daniel. The early years had been the hardest, trying to be both mother and father to a grieving child while dealing with her own grief, making ends meet on a single income. Coming home exhausted but still finding energy to help Daniel with homework, to cook dinner, to be present for her son. But Rose was strong. She had to be. She had made a promise to herself and to James's memory that she would raise their son to be a good man, and that's exactly what she did. As Daniel grew older, he became aware of the sacrifices his mother made for him. He noticed how she would mend her clothes instead of buying new ones, how she would clip coupons and search for sales at the grocery store, how she would stay up late sewing tears in his school uniform so he wouldn't be embarrassed by worn clothes. When Daniel was 14, Rose found him looking through the want ads in the newspaper. "What are you doing, son?" she had asked. "Looking for a job," Daniel replied seriously. "Mrs. Johnson down the street said her son delivers newspapers in the morning before school. I could do that." "Daniel, you need to focus on school." "Mom," he interrupted, with a maturity beyond his years, "I know you're working so hard for us. I want to help." Rose had cried that night after Daniel went to bed, both from pride and a deep sadness that her son had to grow up so fast. Daniel did get that paper route, and he gave every penny to Rose, though she secretly put most of it into a savings account for his future education. By the time Daniel was 16, he was working weekends at the grocery store as a bagger. He was a straight-A student, particularly gifted in mathematics. His teachers encouraged him to think about college, something Rose had always hoped for but wasn't sure they could afford. I'll get scholarships, Mom, Daniel told her confidently, and I'll work part-time. You won't have to pay anything. And he had done exactly that. Through hard work and determination, Daniel had secured enough scholarships and grants to attend the state university, majoring in accounting. He had worked evenings and weekends at the campus bookstore, sending money home to Rose whenever he could. Mom, you should quit your job, he would say during his visits home. I can support us now. But Rose wouldn't hear of it. You focus on your education, son. I'm fine. When Daniel graduated with honors, Rose sat in the audience crying tears of joy and pride. Her boy, her wonderful boy, had done it. Despite all the hardships, despite losing his father, despite growing up with limited means, he had succeeded. Daniel had quickly found a job at an accounting firm in the city. It wasn't the most prestigious firm, but they offered him a decent starting salary and opportunities for advancement. More importantly, it allowed him to stay close to Rose. Mom, we're going to live together, he had told her firmly when he got the job offer. I've already looked at apartments. Son, you should have your own place, Rose had protested. You're a young man now. You need your independence. Mom, Daniel had said, taking her hands in his, you've taken care of me my whole life. Now it's my turn to take care of you. Please, let me do this for you. And so, they had moved into the small 2-bedroom apartment where they now lived. Daniel insisted on paying all the bills. He even convinced Rose to reduce her hours at the doctor's office from full-time to part-time. You need to rest more, he would tell her. You've worked hard enough. Their life together had fallen into a comfortable routine. Daniel working at the accounting firm, steadily building his career. Rose working part-time and keeping their home warm and welcoming. Weekends spent together reading, watching movies, taking walks in the park, attending church on Sundays. It wasn't an exciting life by most standards. They didn't travel to exotic places. They didn't own expensive things. But it was a good life, a peaceful life, filled with love and mutual respect. You know, Daniel would sometimes say as they sat together on their old couch, Dad would be so proud of us, of how we've managed. He would be proud of you, Rose would correct him. You're so much like him, Daniel. The same kind eyes, the same honest heart. Daniel treasured those words. Though his memories of his father had faded with time, he had grown up hearing stories about James Parker, his integrity, his work ethic, his dreams for the future. Dad always wanted his own business, Daniel would remind Rose. Someday I'm going to have my own firm too, for him and for you. So when the opportunity with Mr. Stone had appeared, it had seemed like the fulfillment of that promise, a chance to honor his father's memory, a chance to finally give his mother the comfortable life she deserved. The first time Daniel mentioned Richard Stone to Rose, she didn't think much of it. Daniel often talked about people from work, colleagues, clients, supervisors. There's this client who keeps requesting me specifically for his accounts, Daniel had told her one evening as they ate dinner. Mr. Richard Stone. He says I'm more thorough than the other accountants. That's wonderful, son, Rose had replied, proud but not surprised. Her Daniel was always thorough, always careful. Over the next few weeks, Stone's name came up more frequently in their conversations. Mr. Stone invited me to lunch today, Daniel shared one evening. He wanted to discuss some investment strategies. Mom, this man is brilliant. He's built 3 successful companies from the ground up. Rose smiled, happy to see her son excited about his work. It sounds like you're learning a lot from him. I am, Daniel nodded eagerly. He's the kind of businessman I want to be someday. Smart but ethical, successful but grounded. Rose didn't see the shadow that would soon engulf their lives. She didn't recognize the name Richard Stone as the beginning of a nightmare. How could she? The lunches with Stone became more frequent. Then came dinner invitations. Then weekend meetings. Son, you're working too hard, Rose would caution. You need to rest. This isn't just work, Mom, Daniel would explain, his eyes bright with excitement. This is my future. Mr. Stone is teaching me things they never taught us in college. Real-world business strategies. Then came the evening that changed everything. Daniel had come home practically bursting with excitement. Mom, you won't believe what happened today, he had said, pacing the living room. Mr. Stone called me into his office. I thought maybe I had made a mistake on his accounts, but it wasn't that at all. Rose had watched him, smiling at his enthusiasm. "What was it, son?" Daniel had sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "He wants to start a new business with me, Mom, a financial consulting firm. He says I have a natural talent for spotting investment opportunities. He'll provide the startup capital, and I'll manage the financial side." "A business?" Rose had repeated, surprised. "With you as a partner?" "Yes, an equal partner," Daniel emphasized. "We'll split everything 50-50. Mom, do you know what this means? If it works out, and with Mr. Stone's connections, it will. We could be looking at serious money. We could buy a house. You could fully retire. We could travel." Rose had felt a mixture of happiness and unease. On one hand, she was thrilled for Daniel. This was his dream, to have his own business like his father had wanted. On the other hand, it seemed too sudden, too perfect. "Son, how well do you really know this Mr. Stone?" she had asked cautiously. Daniel had brushed off her concerns. "Mom, Mr. Stone is respected throughout the industry. He's on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. He gives to charities. Everyone knows him and trusts him." "But you've only known him for a few months," Rose had persisted. "Sometimes, Mom, opportunities come when you least expect them," Daniel had replied. "Dad would have told me to go for it." That had silenced Rose's objections. The invocation of James's memory was something she couldn't argue against, even if she wanted to. Over the following weeks, Daniel had thrown himself into preparations for the new venture. Stone had provided legal documents for Daniel to review, partnership agreements, business plans, financial projections. Daniel would stay up late at their kitchen table, poring over the papers, making notes, running calculations. "Son, at least take a break for dinner," Rose would urge, placing a plate beside his papers. "Just a few more minutes, Mom," Daniel would mumble, barely looking up. Rose had watched with increasing concern as Daniel lost weight, as dark circles formed under his eyes, as his normally neat appearance became slightly disheveled from lack of sleep and too much coffee. "Is this really worth it?" she had asked one night, bringing him yet another cup of coffee. Daniel had looked up at her with tired but determined eyes. "Mom, this is our chance. Our one big chance to change our lives. I'm not going to waste it." 2 months after Stone's initial offer, the partnership agreement was ready to sign. Daniel had asked Rose to come with him to Stone's office for the signing ceremony. "I want you there, Mom," he had said. "This is for both of us." Stone's office had been everything Rose expected. Plush carpets, expensive artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the city. Stone himself had greeted them with his perfect white smile and firm handshake. "Mrs. Parker, a pleasure to finally meet you in person," he had said, kissing her hand in a gesture that felt both charming and slightly inappropriate. "Your son speaks of you constantly." "Thank you for this opportunity for Daniel," Rose had replied politely. Stone had led them to a large conference room where a lawyer waited with the documents. As Daniel read through the final agreement one more time, Rose had studied Stone. His tailored suit, his manicured nails, his carefully styled gray hair. He looked successful, confident, completely at ease. But something in his eyes had troubled her. A calculating coldness that appeared when he thought no one was watching. A predatory gleam when he looked at Daniel bent over the papers. "Is everything in order, Daniel?" Stone had asked, his voice smooth as silk. "It looks good, Mr. Stone." Daniel had nodded, pen poised over the signature line. "Wait," Rose had said suddenly, surprising herself. "Daniel, may I speak with you privately for a moment?" Daniel had looked embarrassed. "Mom, everything's fine." "Just 1 minute, please," Rose had insisted. In the hallway outside the conference room, Rose had grasped Daniel's arm. "Son, something doesn't feel right," she had whispered urgently. "I can't explain it, but I don't trust him." Daniel had sighed. "Mom, we've been over this. This is business. Everything is properly documented and legally sound. I've checked every line of those agreements." "It's not the papers I'm worried about," Rose had tried to explain. "It's him. There's something cold about him." "That's just how successful businessmen are, Mom," Daniel had replied. "They have to be a little detached. It's not personal. It's business." "Your father was going to be a businessman, and he was never cold," Rose had countered. A flash of hurt had crossed Daniel's face. "Dad never got the chance, did he? He died before he could make anything of himself." The words had stung Rose deeply. "Daniel, your father was a good man who provided for his family. That's making something of yourself. Daniel's expression had softened immediately, regret replacing the momentary anger. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean it like that. I want this so badly. For us, for our future. Please, trust me. Rose had looked into her son's earnest face, at the hope and determination in his eyes, and she couldn't find it in her heart to stand in his way. Okay, son, she had relented. I trust you. They had returned to the conference room, where Daniel signed the partnership agreement with a flourish. Stone had poured champagne for a toast, and photographs were taken of the two men shaking hands. To Parker and Stone Financial Consultants, Stone had announced, raising his glass, may our partnership be long and profitable. Rose had smiled for the photographs, had sipped the expensive champagne, had accepted congratulations from the lawyer and Stone's secretary. But the unease in her heart had remained, a quiet warning that she had chosen to ignore. For the next few weeks, Daniel had been busier than ever. The new company needed office space, furniture, computers, phone lines, a website. Stone handled most of the expenses while Daniel managed the logistics, working nights and weekends to get everything ready. The clients will start coming as soon as we open, Daniel had told Rose excitedly. Mr. Stone has already lined up meetings with some of his contacts. Rose had watched her son transform with this new purpose. He stood taller. He spoke more confidently. He made plans for the future with an assurance he had never shown before. Next year we'll move to a bigger apartment, he would tell her, maybe even a small house, and once the business is established, we'll take a vacation. How does Hawaii sound? Rose would smile and nod, caught up in his enthusiasm despite her lingering concerns. That sounds wonderful, son, but don't get ahead of yourself. New businesses take time to grow. Not this one, Daniel would insist. Mr. Stone knows what he's doing. He's done this before. Those words would come back to haunt them both. Stone did indeed know what he was doing. He had done it before, but not in the way Daniel believed. The day Parker and Stone Financial Consultants officially opened its doors should have been one of celebration. Instead, it marked the beginning of the end. Rose remembered that day clearly. Daniel had left early in the morning, dressed in his best suit, the one she had helped him pick out for special occasions. His hair was neatly combed, his shoes polished to a shine. He had kissed her on the cheek before leaving. This is it, Mom, he had said, his voice trembling with excitement. Day one of our new life. I'm proud of you, son, Rose had told him, straightening his tie one last time. So proud. Daniel had promised to call her at lunchtime to tell her how things were going. When noon came and went without a call, Rose hadn't worried. He was busy after all. But when dinner time arrived and Daniel still hadn't called, she began to feel uneasy. She had tried his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She had called the office number he had given her, but no one answered. By 9 o'clock that evening, Rose was truly worried. This wasn't like Daniel. He always called if he was going to be late. At 10:30, she had heard his key in the lock. Relief had flooded through her as she rushed to the door. Daniel, I was so worried. The words died on her lips as she saw her son's face. He was pale, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted. Son, what's wrong? What happened? Daniel had walked past her to the couch and sat down heavily, his movements mechanical, as if he was operating on autopilot. The money's gone, Mom, he had said, his voice hollow. What money? What are you talking about? The startup money, the operating capital. It's gone, all of it, $5 million, just gone. Rose had sat beside him, fear creeping up her spine. How can it be gone? Where did it go? Daniel had run his hands through his hair, messing up its neat arrangement. Mr. Stone says I took it. He says I transferred it to my personal account. He showed me the transaction records, Mom. They have my login credentials, my password, my electronic signature. That's impossible, Rose had gasped. You wouldn't— Of course I didn't take it, Daniel had cried, his voice breaking. I would never steal anything. But the evidence? It all points to me. Mr. Stone called the police. Mom, they're investigating. They're going to arrest me. Rose had felt the room spin around her. This couldn't be happening. Not to her Daniel, not to her honest, hard-working son. There must be a mistake, she had insisted. We'll clear this up, we'll explain. Daniel had looked at her with desperate eyes. The evidence looks real, Mom, really real. I saw it myself. If I didn't know better, I'd think I did it. But you didn't, Rose had said firmly. No, I didn't, Daniel had agreed. Which means, someone set you up, Rose had finished for him, the terrible truth dawning on her. Mr. Stone, Daniel had whispered. It had to be him. But why? Why would he do this to me? Rose had thought about the coldness she had seen in Stone's eyes, the predatory gleam. She had been right to be uneasy, right to be concerned, but she had let Daniel sign those papers anyway. We'll figure this out, she had promised, pulling her son into a tight embrace. Whatever happens, we'll face it together, and we will find the truth. Little did Rose know then just how difficult that promise would be to keep. Little did she know the battle that lay ahead. Little did she know that her faith, her love, and her determination would be tested in ways she could never have imagined. A week later, the police had come to their door with an arrest warrant. Daniel Parker was charged with embezzlement and grand theft. The nightmare had officially begun. Now, months later, Rose stood in a courtroom, ready to fight for her son's freedom, ready to expose the truth about Richard Stone and his scheme. The journey had been long and difficult, filled with tears and sleepless nights. But Rose Parker was not a woman who gave up easily, especially when it came to protecting her child. As she faced the judge, the prosecutor, and the man who had framed her son, Rose felt a strength rising within her, a mother's strength, a warrior's strength. Your Honor, she began, I'm here today to tell you the truth about my son and about Mr. Richard Stone. The courtroom fell silent, waiting to hear what this determined mother had discovered. The battle for justice was about to begin. Rose Parker's world changed forever the moment those police officers walked through her front door. But to truly understand how her son ended up facing serious criminal charges, we need to examine what happened in the weeks leading up to Daniel's arrest, the subtle warning signs, the red flags that went unnoticed, and the careful manipulation orchestrated by Richard Stone. 3 months before the arrest, Daniel Parker was simply an accountant with dreams of something more. His desk at Marshall & Associates accounting firm was neat and organized, much like his approach to life. Spreadsheets were aligned perfectly on his computer screen, receipts and invoices sorted into color-coded folders. Daniel found comfort in numbers. They were consistent, reliable, honest. Daniel, his supervisor had called one morning. Mr. Stone is here for his quarterly review, conference room 3, and bring the investment portfolio analysis you prepared. Daniel had nodded, gathering his materials with careful precision. Richard Stone was one of the firm's most important clients, a successful businessman with multiple companies and substantial investments. Daniel had been handling his accounts for nearly 6 months, and while they had developed a cordial professional relationship, it had never extended beyond the walls of the accounting firm. Until that day. The meeting had gone well. Daniel presented his analysis of Stone's investment portfolio, making several suggestions for tax optimization and growth opportunities. Stone had listened attentively, occasionally making notes in an expensive leather-bound notebook. Parker, Stone had said as the meeting concluded, that was impressive work. Most accountants just run the numbers. You actually understand what they mean. Thank you, sir, Daniel had replied, pleased but professional. I try to see the bigger picture. Stone had studied Daniel with evaluating eyes. Tell me, are you happy here, at Marshall & Associates? The question had caught Daniel off guard. It's a good firm. They've been very fair to me. That's not what I asked, Stone had pressed. Are you happy? Daniel had hesitated, unsure how to respond. The truth was, while he appreciated the stability of his job, it wasn't what he had dreamed of. He wanted more challenge, more opportunity, more ability to provide for his mother. I'm satisfied with my position, Daniel had answered diplomatically. Stone had laughed, a sharp, knowing sound. Young man, satisfied is what people say when they're afraid to admit they're settling. He had leaned forward, lowering his voice. I recognize talent when I see it, Parker. You're wasted here, crunching numbers for other people's businesses when you could be building something of your own. Those words had stirred something in Daniel, a long-buried ambition, a dream he had set aside for practicality's sake. Join me for lunch, Stone had suggested, checking his gold watch. "I have a proposition that might interest you." That lunch at Le Méridien, an upscale restaurant Daniel would never have entered on his own, was the first turning point. Over expensive steaks and sparkling water, Stone didn't drink alcohol during business meetings, clouds the judgment, he'd explained. Stone had outlined his vision. "I'm looking to start a new financial consulting firm," he had told Daniel. "Not the usual stuffy operation, but something innovative, something that combines traditional accounting with investment strategy and digital financial services." "Sounds ambitious," Daniel had commented. "It is," Stone had agreed, "which is why I need the right partner, someone young, someone hungry, someone with both technical skill and vision." He had paused, fixing Daniel with an intense gaze. "Someone like you." Daniel had nearly choked on his water. "Me? But I'm just an accountant?" Stone had finished for him. "So was I, 20 years ago, before I built my first company, before I learned that true success comes from taking calculated risks." He had set down his fork and knife, giving Daniel his full attention. "I've been watching you, Parker. The way you handle my accounts, the suggestions you make. You don't think like an employee. You think like an owner." The praise had warmed Daniel, breaking through years of cautious restraint. "Mr. Stone, I'm flattered, but I don't have the capital to start a business." "I do," Stone had stated simply. "What I need is someone with your skills, your perspective, your work ethic. I'm proposing a partnership, equal shares. I provide the startup capital and my business connections. You provide the financial expertise and day-to-day management." Daniel had struggled to keep his expression neutral, to hide the excitement building inside him. "Why me? You could hire any accountant with my qualifications, probably someone with more experience." Stone had smiled, seeming pleased by the question. "Experience is overrated. I'm more interested in raw talent and integrity. You have both. Besides," he had added, taking a sip of water, "I prefer to work with someone who hasn't been corrupted by corporate politics, someone whose values align with mine." The conversation had shifted then, to Stone asking about Daniel's background, his family, his goals. Daniel had found himself opening up about his father's death, about his mother's sacrifices, about his dream of providing Rose with the comfortable life she deserved. "Family is everything," Stone had agreed, his expression softening. "My own mother raised me single-handedly after my father abandoned us. Everything I've achieved has been to prove him wrong and to make her proud." The shared experience had created an immediate bond between them. By the end of lunch, Daniel felt like he had found not just a potential business partner, but a mentor, perhaps even a friend. "Think about my offer," Stone had said as they parted. "Talk it over with your mother. This is a big decision, and I respect that you'll want her input." Daniel had walked back to his office in a daze, his mind racing with possibilities. A partnership with Richard Stone, equal shares in a new business. A chance to build something of his own. It seemed too good to be true. That evening, Daniel had told Rose about Stone's proposition, his words tumbling out in excited bursts. "He wants me as his partner, Mom, not as employee, his partner." Rose had listened carefully, her initial joy at seeing her son so animated gradually giving way to concern. "It sounds wonderful, son, but aren't partnerships usually between people who know each other well? You've only worked with this man for a few months." "Sometimes you just know when something's right," Daniel had insisted. "Mr. Stone could pick anyone, Mom, but he chose me. He sees something in me that others don't." Rose had recognized the look in her son's eyes, the same determined hope she had seen in James's face when he talked about opening his own shop. She couldn't bring herself to dampen that spark. "Just be careful," she had cautioned. "Take your time. Make sure everything is properly documented." Daniel had promised he would, but his mind was already made up. The very next day, he had called Stone to accept the offer. What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Stone had introduced Daniel to his attorney, a sleek, efficient woman named Ms. Winters, who drafted the partnership agreement. Daniel had spent evenings poring over the documents, consulting with a lawyer friend from college for advice. "It looks standard," his friend had confirmed after reviewing the agreement. "Actually, it's quite generous. Stone is putting up all the capital but only taking 50% ownership. You're getting a good deal, Daniel. The partnership agreement was signed 2 weeks later in Stone's office. Parker and Stone Financial Consultants was officially born. Stone had moved quickly after that. He leased office space in a prestigious downtown building. He ordered high-end furniture, state-of-the-art computers, the latest financial software. No expense was spared. Appearances matter in this business, Stone had explained when Daniel expressed concern about the costs. Clients need to feel they're entrusting their money to successful people. Daniel couldn't argue with that logic. Besides, Stone was covering all the startup expenses from his personal accounts. The company's operating capital, $5 million that Stone had transferred into the business account, remained untouched, reserved for operational costs once they opened their doors. In the weeks leading up to the official opening, Daniel worked tirelessly. Days at his regular accounting job, evenings and weekends at the new office, setting up systems, preparing client materials, developing service packages. Stone was equally busy, though in different ways. He arranged meetings with potential clients, most of them associates from his extensive business network. He gave interviews to local business publications, promoting the new venture. He handled the marketing, the branding, the public relations. "You focus on what you do best," he told Daniel. "I'll handle the rest." It was during this period that Daniel began to notice small inconsistencies in Stone's behavior. Nothing alarming, just moments that gave him pause. Once, Daniel had arrived at the office unexpectedly on a Sunday to find Stone at Daniel's computer. Stone had explained he was checking some files and couldn't access them from his own computer due to a technical issue. It had seemed reasonable enough. Another time, Daniel had overheard Stone on the phone, his voice uncharacteristically harsh. "It needs to be untraceable this time," Stone had said. "The last one nearly came back to me." When he noticed Daniel, Stone had quickly ended the call, explaining it was about a personal investment matter. There were other moments, Stone asking detailed questions about the financial software's security protocols, Stone suggesting Daniel use a particular password management system that Stone himself had set up, Stone casually mentioning he might need emergency access to all company accounts, just in case something happens to you. In retrospect, these were warning signs, but in the excitement of launching the business, in the glow of Stone's apparent trust and mentorship, Daniel had dismissed his occasional unease. Rose, however, had grown increasingly concerned as she observed the subtle changes in her son. The late nights, the constant phone calls, the singular focus on pleasing Stone. "He's working you too hard," she had commented one evening when Daniel arrived home past midnight, exhausted but still checking emails on his phone. "It's not him, Mom," Daniel had defended. "It's me. I want everything to be perfect when we open." "And when will that be?" Rose had asked. "The opening date keeps getting pushed back." It was true. The original launch date had been postponed twice, each time because Stone claimed he needed to finalize additional client commitments. "Business launches are complicated," Daniel had explained, repeating what Stone had told him. "It's better to delay than to open before we're ready." Rose had let the matter drop, but her instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. The way Stone had insinuated himself into every aspect of Daniel's life. The way her son deferred to Stone's judgment even when it contradicted his own instincts. The way Stone always had a smooth explanation for every concern. It reminded her of stories she'd read about con artists and their techniques. One evening, about 2 weeks before Daniel's arrest, Rose had decided to voice her concerns more directly. "Son," she had begun as they ate dinner together. A rare occurrence during that busy period. "I need to ask you something about Mr. Stone, and I want you to really think before you answer." Daniel had looked up from his plate, surprised by her serious tone. "What is it, Mom?" "Do you actually know anything about him? His background, his family, his previous businesses? Anything that you haven't heard directly from him?" The question had clearly startled Daniel. "Of course I do. He's a well-known businessman. He's on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. Everyone knows Richard Stone." "But what do you know for certain?" Rose had pressed. "Have you verified any of it?" Daniel had set down his fork, a flash of annoyance crossing his face. "Mom, why are you doing this? Mr. Stone has invested millions in our partnership. He's introduced me to dozens of his associates. Why would he do all that if he wasn't legitimate?" "I don't know," Rose had admitted. but something doesn't feel right. The way he's always checking on you, always directing you. The way you've changed since you met him." "Changed? How have I changed?" "You're different," Rose had said softly. "Less confident in your own judgment, more eager to please him. It's like you're becoming his shadow instead of his partner." Daniel had pushed back from the table, anger replacing annoyance. "That's not fair, Mom. I'm learning from him. Of course I defer to his experience sometimes. That's how mentorship works." "Partners aren't mentors and protégés," Rose had pointed out. "They're equals. When was the last time he took your advice on something important?" The question had hung in the air between them. Daniel had opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, seemingly unable to recall a specific instance. "Just promise me one thing," Rose had requested. "Before you go any further with this partnership, do some research on your own. Look into his background, his previous businesses, not to prove me right, but to prove me wrong, for my peace of mind." Daniel had relented, promising to do some digging. But the next day brought an emergency at the office, a problem with the financial software installation that required immediate attention, and the conversation was forgotten. Or so Rose thought. What she didn't know was that her questions had planted a seed of doubt in Daniel's mind. That night, after fixing the software issue, Daniel had stayed late at the office. Alone, with Rose's concerns echoing in his thoughts, he had begun to search for information about Richard Stone's business history. What he found wasn't immediately alarming. Stone had indeed started and sold several successful companies. He was on the boards of various business and charitable organizations. His public reputation appeared spotless. But as Daniel dug deeper, he began to notice a pattern. Stone's former business partners were conspicuously absent from his current social and professional circles. Searching for their names led to sparse results. A few had apparently left the business world entirely. One had moved overseas. Another had faced legal troubles unrelated to Stone. Curious now, Daniel had accessed public court records, searching for any litigation involving Stone or his companies. The results showed several civil suits filed by former partners against Stone, all settled out of court with confidentiality agreements. Most concerning was a case from 5 years earlier. A former partner named James Mercer had sued Stone for fraud and misappropriation of funds. The case had been dropped suddenly, with no explanation in the public record. Searching for information about Mercer after that date yielded nothing. It was as if he had disappeared. Daniel had sat back in his chair, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. It wasn't proof of wrongdoing. Lawsuits happened in business all the time, and settlements didn't necessarily indicate guilt, but it was enough to make him uneasy. He had decided to confront Stone the next day, to ask directly about these former partners and the lawsuits, not accusingly, just seeking clarity to ease his concerns. But when morning came, Stone was unusually attentive, bringing Daniel coffee from his favorite shop, enthusiastically sharing news about a major client who had committed to signing with them on opening day. "This is it, Daniel," Stone had said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Everything we've worked for is coming together. In 1 week, we open our doors and our lives change forever." The moment had seemed wrong for difficult questions. Daniel had told himself he would wait for a better opportunity, perhaps after they launched successfully and the initial pressure was off. That opportunity never came. 3 days later, Stone had called Daniel to an urgent meeting at the office. When Daniel arrived, he found Stone sitting grimly at the conference table, a stack of printouts in front of him. "We have a problem," Stone had said without preamble. "A serious one." Daniel had felt a surge of anxiety. "What is it? Client issues? Software problems?" Stone had pushed the printouts across the table. $5 million is missing from the company account, transferred out in small increments over the past 2 weeks. Daniel had stared at the papers in shock. "That's impossible. The operating capital? How could it be missing?" "That's what I'd like to know," Stone had replied, his voice hard and cold, so different from his usual warm tone. "Because according to the transaction records, the money was transferred to an account at First National Bank, your personal account, Daniel." The accusation had hit Daniel like a physical blow. "My account? That's absurd. The evidence is right here," Stone had cut him off. "Your login credentials, your password, your authorization codes, all used to systematically drain our company's funds. Mr. Stone, I would never steal from you, from our company, Daniel had protested, his mind racing to make sense of what was happening. Someone must have hacked our system or— Stop, Stone had interrupted, raising a hand. I've already spoken to the bank. The money is in your account, Daniel. They confirmed it. $5 million that doesn't belong to you. Daniel had felt the room spinning around him. This is a mistake. It has to be. Let me check my account right now. I've called the police, Stone had announced coldly. They're on their way. I've also notified the partners at your accounting firm. Your reputation in this city is finished. The police? Daniel had echoed, disbelief giving way to panic. Mr. Stone, please, you know me. You know I wouldn't do this. We need to investigate, to find out who's really responsible. For a brief moment, something had flickered in Stone's eyes, a hint of satisfaction quickly masked by righteous anger. I thought I knew you, Stone had said, standing up. I thought I'd found someone with integrity, someone I could trust. Instead, I found another thief trying to take advantage of me. Another? Daniel had repeated, the word catching his attention. Has this happened to you before? Stone had ignored the question. The police will be here soon. I suggest you don't make this worse by trying to run. As if on cue, the office door had opened and 2 police officers had entered. Stone had greeted them by name, suggesting he had worked with them before. Officers, this is Daniel Parker, Stone had said, his voice heavy with manufactured disappointment. I've shown him the evidence of his theft and he's admitted the money is in his account. I didn't admit anything because I didn't do anything, Daniel had protested. Mr. Stone, please, this is a mistake. But Stone had already handed the officers the transaction records, explaining in detail how the company's money had been systematically transferred to Daniel's personal account. The officers had listened, then approached Daniel. Mr. Parker, we need you to come with us for questioning regarding the theft of $5 million from Stone Enterprises. Stone Enterprises, Daniel had repeated, confused. But our company is Parker & Stone Financial Consultants. The funds were transferred from Stone Enterprises' investment account to your company's operational account, then to your personal account, the officer had explained. Mr. Stone has provided documentation of the entire trail. Daniel had looked at Stone in shock and dawning comprehension. The company account had never actually held money from Stone personally. It had been Stone Enterprises' funds all along, which meant their partnership was just a shell, a front for whatever Stone was planning. As the officers had handcuffed him, Daniel had made one last appeal to the man he thought had been his mentor and friend. Why are you doing this? What did I ever do to you? Stone had looked at him with cold eyes. Nothing personal, Parker, just business. Those were the last words Stone had spoken directly to Daniel. The officers had led him away, through the office building, past staring workers from neighboring businesses, into a police car waiting at the curb. By evening, Daniel was in a holding cell at the county jail, charged with embezzlement and grand theft. His life, his reputation, his future, all destroyed in a single day. When Rose arrived at the jail, frantic after receiving Daniel's one phone call, she found her son shell-shocked and bewildered. Mom, he had said through the visiting room glass, I didn't take that money. I swear on Dad's memory, I didn't take it. I know, son, Rose had assured him, fighting back tears. I know you didn't. But the evidence, it looks so real. The money is actually in my account. I checked online. $5 million that I never deposited, never touched. Rose had pressed her hand against the glass. Mr. Stone did this to you, didn't he? Daniel had nodded slowly, the full weight of the betrayal sinking in. He set me up from the beginning, everything, the partnership, the mentorship, the friendship. It was all a lie. He was planning this the whole time. Why? Rose had asked, the question that would haunt them both in the months to come. Why would he do this? I don't know, Daniel had admitted, but I think he's done it before. He said something about another thief. And when I searched court records, I found lawsuits from former partners. Rose's mind had raced, trying to make sense of it all. So he finds young, talented people, pretends to mentor them, sets them up as the fall guy for some kind of financial crime, and then— What? What does he gain? The money, obviously, Daniel had said bitterly. $5 million. But he's already wealthy, Rose had pointed out. He wouldn't risk his reputation for money he doesn't need. Unless, Daniel had trailed off, a new possibility occurring to him. Unless the money was already stolen or embezzled from somewhere else. What if he's using people like me to launder money or hide financial crimes? The theory had made terrible sense. Create a business with an unsuspecting partner, move questionable funds through the business, frame the partner for theft, and walk away with clean money and a perfect alibi. We need to prove it, Rose had said, determination replacing her shock and grief. We need to show the court what he's really doing. Daniel had laughed without humor. How? He's thought of everything. The evidence against me is perfect. The money is literally in my account. No one is going to believe my word against his, especially not with a paper trail backing him up. I'll find a way, Rose had promised. I don't know how yet, but I will find a way to prove your innocence and expose what Stone has done. Daniel had looked at his mother through the glass, seeing the fierce determination in her eyes. For the first time since his arrest, he felt a flicker of hope. Be careful, Mom, he had warned. If Stone realizes you're investigating him, he might come after you too. Let him try, Rose had replied, her voice steel. I'm not afraid of him. As the visiting time ended and Daniel was led back to his cell, Rose had made a silent vow. She would not rest until her son was free, and Richard Stone faced justice for what he had done. She would learn whatever she needed to learn, go wherever she needed to go, do whatever she needed to do. A mother's love is a powerful force, and Rose Parker was about to prove just how powerful it could be. Do you think Richard Stone is truly guilty? Comment Stone is guilty if you believe he set up Daniel, or evidence doesn't lie if you think Daniel might be hiding something from his mother. Rose Parker sat alone at her kitchen table, surrounded by scattered papers, an untouched cup of cold coffee beside her. The soft glow of her laptop illuminated her tired face as the clock on the wall ticked past midnight. 3 weeks had passed since Daniel's arrest, and each day had brought new challenges, new heartbreaks, and new reasons to fight harder. The day after Daniel's arrest had been a blur of panic and confusion. Rose had called in sick to her job at the doctor's office, something she had rarely done in 15 years of employment. Then she had begun making phone calls to lawyers, to Daniel's friends, to her sister Rachel. Most calls ended in disappointment. Lawyers wanted retainer fees she couldn't afford. Friends expressed shock and sympathy but kept their distance, as if Daniel's alleged crime might somehow be contagious. Even some family members seemed hesitant, their support tempered by unspoken doubt. Of course, Daniel didn't do it, they would say, but their eyes told a different story. But the evidence, only Rachel had come through unconditionally, arriving at Rose's apartment with groceries and a fierce hug. We'll get through this, Rachel had promised, helping Rose sort through the papers from Daniel's desk. Daniel's a good boy. Anyone who knows him knows he wouldn't steal. But as the days passed, Rose realized that knowing Daniel wasn't enough. The legal system didn't operate on character testimonials and mother's intuition. It demanded evidence, facts, proof, all of which currently pointed to Daniel's guilt. The preliminary hearing had been a nightmare. Rose had sat in the courtroom watching as the prosecutor laid out the case against her son. The evidence seemed overwhelming. Bank records showing the transfers from Stone Enterprises to Parker and Stone Financial Consultants to Daniel's personal account. Digital logs confirming that Daniel's login credentials had been used to authorize the transactions. Daniel's electronic signature on the transfer documents. Daniel had been assigned a public defender, a young, overworked lawyer named Thomas Roberts, who had barely had time to review the case before the hearing. His defense had been weak, focused mainly on Daniel's lack of prior criminal record rather than challenging the evidence itself. My client has no history of dishonesty or criminal behavior, Roberts had argued. He's a respected accountant with an exemplary professional record. The prosecutor, a sharp-dressed man named James Wilson, had dismissed this with a wave of his hand. First-time offenders commit crimes every day. The evidence in this case is clear. Mr. Parker systematically stole $5 million from his business partner over a period of 2 weeks. The money was found in his personal account. His electronic signature is on the transfers. This is an open and shut case of embezzlement. The judge had set bail at $150,000, an impossible sum for Rose to raise. Daniel had been remanded to county jail to await trial, which was scheduled for 3 months later. Leaving the courthouse, Rose had felt a despair unlike anything she'd experienced since James's death. Her son was in jail, accused of a crime he didn't commit, and she had no idea how to help him. That night, alone in the apartment that felt too empty without Daniel, Rose had broken down. She had sobbed into her pillow, not wanting the neighbors to hear, releasing the fear and grief that had built up since the arrest. "James," she had whispered to her long-dead husband, "I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do." In the silence that followed, Rose had slowly calmed herself. Crying wouldn't help Daniel, neither would falling apart. What he needed was someone to fight for him, someone who believed in his innocence completely and unconditionally. "I will not let him go to prison for something he didn't do," Rose had promised the empty room. "Whatever it takes, I'll find the truth." The next day, Rose had begun in earnest. She had taken a leave of absence from her job, explaining the situation to her sympathetic employer. Then, she had turned the kitchen table into a command center of sorts, spreading out all the documents she had related to Daniel's case. Police reports, bank statements, the partnership agreement with Stone, printouts of news articles about the arrest. The partnership agreement had been her starting point. Rose had read it carefully, line by line, looking for anything suspicious. The language seemed straightforward enough. Stone providing the capital, Daniel managing the financial operations, profits to be split equally. But there was one clause that caught her attention. In the event of criminal activity by either partner, all partnership assets shall revert to the non-offending partner. It seemed innocent enough on the surface, a standard protection against a partner who might engage in illegal activities. But in light of what had happened, it took on a more sinister meaning. If Daniel was convicted of embezzlement, Stone would gain complete control of the business they had built together. He planned this from the beginning, Rose had realized, a chill running through her. The partnership was never real. It was just a setup for the theft. But suspicion wasn't proof. Rose needed evidence that Stone, not Daniel, was behind the missing money. She needed to understand how Stone had framed her son, and she needed to find a way to prove it in court. The problem was, Rose knew almost nothing about digital banking, electronic signatures, or financial fraud. She was a receptionist, not a computer expert or a forensic accountant. But what she lacked in knowledge, she made up for in determination. Rose began educating herself. She checked out books from the public library on computer security, banking systems, and financial crimes. She watched online tutorials about digital signatures and authentication protocols. She joined online forums where cybersecurity experts discussed techniques used in financial fraud. Most of it was over her head at first, a bewildering array of technical terms and concepts she had never encountered before. But Rose was patient and persistent. She took notes, looked up unfamiliar words, and slowly began to piece together an understanding of how electronic financial systems worked and how they could be manipulated. One evening, as she was reading about authentication protocols on her laptop, a notification had popped up. Someone named Merchant Defender had replied to a question she had posted on a cybersecurity forum. RE. How can someone use another person's electronic signature without their knowledge? There are several methods, but the most common is credential theft. If someone has access to your login information and password, they can potentially access your electronic signature tool. This is especially true if you use the same password across multiple platforms, or if the system doesn't have multi-factor authentication. Rose had stared at the message, a memory surfacing. Shortly after forming the partnership, Stone had given Daniel a company laptop. He had also recommended a password management system, one that Stone himself had set up. "It'll sync across all our company platforms," Stone had explained. "Makes things more efficient." Had Stone used that password manager to capture Daniel's credentials? It seemed possible, even likely. Rose had replied to Merchant Defender, explaining the situation in vague terms without mentioning names. The response had come quickly. "This sounds like a classic framing scheme. I've seen it before in corporate espionage cases. If you want to prove your friend's innocence, you need access logs showing when and where the system was accessed at the time of the fraudulent transfers. If your friend can prove he was elsewhere during those access times, that's evidence of someone else using his credentials. Access logs. Of course. Every time someone logged into the company's financial system, there would be a record of it. The date, the time, the IP address of the computer used. The next day, Rose had called Daniel's lawyer with this new information. "We need to subpoena the access logs from the company's financial system," she had explained. "If Daniel wasn't at his computer when the transfers were made, that proves someone else used his credentials." Roberts had sounded skeptical. "Mrs. Parker, even if we get those logs, they'll just show that your son's account was used to make the transfers. That doesn't prove he wasn't the one using it." "But what if the logs show the system was accessed from 2 different locations at the same time?" Rose had pressed. "That would prove someone else had his login information." "That's actually a good point," Roberts had admitted. "I'll request those records. But don't get your hopes up. Financial fraud cases are complex, and the prosecution has a strong case." Rose had hung up feeling both frustrated and more determined than ever. If Daniel's own lawyer was half-hearted about his defense, she would have to work twice as hard. While waiting for Roberts to obtain the access logs, Rose had turned her attention to Richard Stone himself. Who was this man who had so easily gained her son's trust and then betrayed him? What was his background, his history, his pattern of behavior? Rose began researching Stone online. She found his company website, his social media profiles, articles about his business successes. On the surface, he appeared to be exactly what he claimed, a successful entrepreneur with multiple thriving businesses. But when Rose dug deeper, she began to notice inconsistencies. Stone claimed to have built his first company from scratch, but there was little information about those early years. He was photographed with various business partners at company launches, but those same partners were conspicuously absent from later photos. Companies that Stone had founded seemed to change names and structures frequently, making it difficult to track their actual performance. Rose created a timeline of Stone's business career, noting each company he had started, each partnership he had formed, each venture that had succeeded or failed. A pattern began to emerge. Stone would start a business with a partner, experience early success, then something would happen. The partnership would dissolve, often amid rumors of financial irregularities, and Stone would emerge with full ownership of the company or a substantial settlement. It had happened at least 3 times that Rose could document, and now it was happening to Daniel. One name caught Rose's attention, James Mercer, a former partner of Stone's who had sued him for fraud 5 years earlier. The case had been dropped suddenly, with no public explanation. Rose had tried to find current information about Mercer, but it was as if he had vanished from the business world after his conflict with Stone. After several hours of searching, Rose had found a single mention of Mercer in a small newspaper from a town called Millfield, some 200 miles away. It was a brief announcement of his appointment as a math teacher at a local high school, a far cry from his previous role as co-founder of a financial technology company. Rose had written down the information, a plan forming in her mind. If anyone could help her understand Richard Stone's methods, it would be someone who had experienced them firsthand. Meanwhile, her visits to Daniel in jail had become the emotional anchor of her weeks. Each time she would share her progress, trying to keep his spirits up while also being honest about the challenges they faced. "I'm learning so much, son," she had told him during one visit, "about digital banking, about electronic signatures. Did you know that IP addresses can be traced to specific locations?" Daniel had smiled despite his surroundings. "Mom, you're amazing. You're basically becoming a tech expert at 65. "Never too old to learn," Rose had replied, though the truth was, much of what she was studying remained confusing to her. "Your lawyer is requesting the access logs from the company's financial system. If we can show you weren't at your computer when those transfers were made, it'll help your case." Daniel's face had brightened momentarily, then fallen again. "Mr. Stone is smart, Mom. He'd think of that. He probably made the transfers when I was at work, using my company computer." Rose had leaned forward. "Were you always at your computer at work, never in meetings or lunch or with clients?" Daniel had thought about it. No, not always. I had meetings with clients, sometimes with Mr. Stone himself, and I took lunch breaks. Usually around noon. Then we need your calendar, Rose had decided. All your appointments, meetings, lunch breaks. If we can show you were away from your computer during even one of those transfers, it helps our case. Daniel had nodded, new hope in his eyes. My work calendar was synced to my phone. It should still be in my iCloud account. The username is my email, and the password is Dad's birthday, followed by Mom, too. Rose had written down the information. I'll check it as soon as I get home. As the visit ended and Daniel was led back to his cell, Rose had felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had a plan now. Find the access logs, check Daniel's calendar, look for discrepancies that would prove someone else had used his credentials. Back at the apartment, Rose had accessed Daniel's iCloud account and found his work calendar. Sure enough, it was filled with appointments, meetings, and blocked-off lunch breaks. Rose had printed out the entire 3 months leading up to Daniel's arrest, creating a detailed timeline of his whereabouts. Now, she just needed the access logs to compare against Daniel's schedule. But obtaining those logs proved more difficult than anticipated. Stone's company claimed they only kept logs for 30 days before automatically deleting them, and conveniently, more than 30 days had passed since the transfers were made. They're lying, Rose had told Roberts over the phone. No financial company deletes their security logs after 30 days. It's standard practice to keep them for at least a year for audit purposes. I agree it's suspicious, Roberts had replied. But without a court order specifically requiring them to produce older logs, there's not much we can do, and getting that order would require showing the judge that the logs are likely to contain exculpatory evidence, which is hard to do without seeing the logs first. It was a frustrating catch-22. Rose needed the logs to prove Daniel's innocence, but she needed evidence of his innocence to get the logs. What about the bank? Rose had asked. Wouldn't they have records of when and where the transfers were initiated? The bank records show the transfers came from the company's financial system, Roberts had explained. They don't show who was logged in or from where. That information would only be in the company's internal logs. Rose had hung up, frustrated but not defeated. If she couldn't get the access logs through official channels, she would find another way. That evening, Rose had returned to the cybersecurity forum, posting a new question. If a company claims they don't have access logs older than 30 days, how likely is this to be true? And is there any way these logs might exist elsewhere? The responses had come quickly. Most agreed that a 30-day retention policy was unusually short, especially for a financial services company. One responder, a user called Security Sage, had provided particularly helpful information. Even if the company claims the logs are gone from their main system, there are several places they might still exist. 1. Backup systems, which often retain data for much longer. 2. The financial software provider's own logs, which many companies keep for troubleshooting purposes. 3. System snapshots created during routine maintenance. 4. Third-party security monitoring services that might retain activity logs. Another user had added, if you're trying to prove unauthorized access, don't focus only on the company's internal logs. Check if the person accused was using public Wi-Fi, a mobile phone, or any other device that could prove they weren't at their computer when the access occurred. Cell phone location data, security camera footage, even credit card transactions showing the person was at lunch when their computer was being used. All of these can help establish an alibi. Rose had written down all these suggestions. Cell phone location data. Of course, Daniel's phone would have been tracking his location the entire time. If he was away from the office, at a client meeting, at lunch, anywhere, when his computer was used to make transfers, that would be proof he wasn't the one who made them. The next day, Rose had called Roberts again. We need Daniel's cell phone records, she had told him. The location data from his phone could prove he wasn't at his computer when the transfers were made. Roberts had sounded more interested this time. That's actually a good approach. Cell towers ping phones constantly, creating a record of approximate location. If Daniel's phone was clearly away from the office during the transfers, that's evidence someone else used his computer. I'll subpoena those records immediately. Finally, a step forward. Rose had felt a surge of hope. If Daniel's phone records showed him away from the office during the transfers, it would at least raise reasonable doubt about his guilt. But even as she pursued the technical evidence, Rose hadn't forgotten about the human angle. Stone's pattern of behavior with previous partners suggested Daniel wasn't his first victim. If Rose could find others who had been similarly framed by Stone, their testimonies could support Daniel's case, which brought her back to James Mercer, the former partner who had sued Stone for fraud before mysteriously dropping the case and leaving the business world. After much deliberation, Rose had decided to travel to Millfield to find Mercer. It was a risk. She couldn't afford to waste time or money on a wild goose chase, but her instincts told her Mercer was key to understanding Stone's methods. Rachel had offered to drive her. "You shouldn't be making that trip alone," she had insisted. "Besides, two heads are better than one. We might notice things the other misses." So, on a Thursday morning, the two sisters had set out for Millfield. The drive had taken nearly 4 hours, giving them plenty of time to discuss their approach. "We should be careful what we say," Rachel had cautioned. "If this Mercer person was actually involved in something illegal with Stone, he might not want to talk to us." "I'll let him know we're not accusing him of anything," Rose had assured her. "We just want to understand what happened between him and Stone." They had arrived in Millfield shortly after noon. It was a small town, the kind where a new face is immediately noticed. Finding the high school had been easy. A brick building near the center of town, surrounded by sports fields and student parking. The school secretary had been friendly but protective when they asked about James Mercer. "May I ask what this is regarding?" she had inquired, eyeing the two older women with polite suspicion. Rose had been prepared with a partial truth. "It's about a former business associate of his, Richard Stone. We're trying to verify some information for a legal matter." The secretary's expression had changed subtly at the mention of Stone's name, a tightening around the eyes, a slight downturn of her mouth. "Mr. Mercer's teaching right now," she had said after a moment. "His last class ends at 3:15. You can wait in the visitors' lounge if you like, or come back then." Rose and Rachel had chosen to wait, spending the time reviewing their questions for Mercer. When the final bell rang at 3:15, students had streamed out of classrooms into the hallways. The secretary had pointed them toward Mercer's classroom. "Room 112, down the hall on the right, but please keep it brief. He has papers to grade." James Mercer had turned out to be a man in his early 40s, with thinning hair and tired eyes that had once likely sparkled with ambition. He had looked up from his desk as Rose and Rachel entered his classroom, a questioning expression on his face. "Mr. Mercer?" Rose had begun. "My name is Rose Parker, and this is my sister, Rachel Thompson. I apologize for the intrusion, but we need to talk to you about Richard Stone." Mercer's face had gone pale at the mention of Stone's name. He had quickly stood up and closed the classroom door, then turned to face them with a guarded expression. "What about him?" he had asked, his voice carefully neutral. "My son, Daniel, was Stone's business partner," Rose had explained. "Now Daniel's in jail, accused of stealing $5 million from their company. Money he never touched, money I believe Stone himself stole." Mercer had stared at Rose for a long moment, then sunk back into his chair, as if his legs could no longer support him. "It happened again," he had whispered, more to himself than to them. "He's still doing it." "Doing what, Mr. Mercer?" Rose had pressed gently. Mercer had run a hand over his face, seeming to age years in seconds. "How much do you know about my history with Stone?" "Only that you were partners, that you sued him for fraud, and that you dropped the case suddenly," Rose had answered honestly. "The rest is guesswork." Mercer had nodded slowly. "I was a financial analyst at Jensen & Brothers when I met Stone. He approached me about a partnership, just like he did with your son. Said he saw potential in me, that together we could build something bigger than either of us could alone." A bitter smile had crossed his face. "I believed him. God help me, I believed every word." Rose had felt a chill of recognition, the same words, the same approach, 5 years apart. "What happened?" she had asked. "We formed a company, Stone and Mercer Financial Services. Stone provided the capital, $3 million. I handled the day-to-day operations, the client relationships, the actual work." Mercer had shaken his head. "For about 6 months, everything seemed perfect. We were growing rapidly. Then one day Stone called me into the office on a weekend, said we had a problem. The money was gone, all of it, and according to the records, I had taken it. Rose had nodded, the parallel to Daniel's situation unmistakable. But you hadn't. Of course not, Mercer had replied sharply, then softened. Sorry, even after 5 years it still gets to me. No, I hadn't touched the money, but the evidence against me was overwhelming. Transfers to an account in my name, my login credentials used to authorize the transactions, my electronic signature on the documents. Just like Daniel, Rose had murmured. I was arrested, Mercer had continued, spent 2 weeks in jail before my family could raise bail, lost my reputation, my career prospects, everything. I filed a countersuit against Stone, claiming he had framed me, but without evidence. He had trailed off, staring into the distance. What made you drop the case? Rachel had asked. Mercer had hesitated, then reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. From it, he had extracted a photograph and handed it to Rose. It showed a young boy, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, playing in a park. My son, Mercer had explained quietly. One day, during the lawsuit, I received an envelope containing this photo and a note. The note said, "Children are so vulnerable. It would be a shame if something happened while he walked to school." Mercer's voice had broken. I dropped the case the next day, moved here, where Stone would never think to look for me, started over as a teacher. Rose had felt sick, the photograph trembling in her hand. He threatened your child. Mercer had nodded, taking the photo back and returning it to the envelope. Stone doesn't just steal money, Mrs. Parker. He steals lives. He finds people with potential, with dreams, with integrity, and he destroys them for profit, and he gets away with it every time. Not this time, Rose had said firmly. This time, we're going to stop him. Mercer had looked at her with a mixture of admiration and pity. How? The evidence against your son is probably as perfect as it was against me. We're gathering our own evidence, Rose had explained. Cell phone location data that could prove Daniel wasn't at his computer when the transfers were made, and now your testimony about Stone's pattern of behavior. Mercer had shaken his head. I can't testify, Mrs. Parker. My son, I understand, Rose had assured him, but there must be others. Stone has done this at least 3 times before Daniel. If we could find the other victims together, with multiple testimonies, we could expose Stone's entire operation. There are others, Mercer had confirmed, at least 2 that I know of. A woman named Sarah Chen was Stone's partner before me, and before her, a man named Peter Rodriguez. I tried to contact them during my own case. Chen wouldn't speak to me at all. Rodriguez gave me the same story I'm giving you now. Stone threatened his family, so he walked away. Rose had taken out a notepad and written down the names. Do you know where they are now? Last I heard, Rodriguez was working at a bank in Arizona. As for Chen, Mercer had hesitated. She died about a year after her case with Stone. Car accident, single vehicle, late at night. Police said she fell asleep at the wheel. A heavy silence had fallen over the classroom. The implication was clear, though none of them dared voice it aloud. Thank you for speaking with us, Mr. Mercer, Rose had finally said, standing to leave. You've been more helpful than you know. Mrs. Parker, Mercer had called as they reached the door. Be careful. Stone is dangerous, more dangerous than you realize. If he suspects you're investigating him... I know the risk, Rose had replied, but my son is innocent, and I won't let him pay for Stone's crimes. The drive back had been quieter than the trip out, both sisters lost in their thoughts. Rose had been processing what they'd learned, confirmation that Stone had a pattern of framing partners for financial theft, that he was willing to threaten families to protect his scheme, that one of his former partners had died under questionable circumstances. We need to document everything Mercer told us, Rachel had said as they neared home. Just in case. Rose had understood the unspoken concern. Just in case something happens to us. Just in case Stone discovers we're investigating him. I'll write it all down tonight, she had agreed. And we'll make copies. One for you to keep, one for my safety deposit box, one for Daniel's lawyer. They had arrived back at Rose's apartment late that evening, both exhausted from the journey and the emotional weight of Mercer's story. Rachel had hugged Rose tightly before leaving. You're the strongest person I know, she had whispered. Daniel's lucky to have you fighting for him. Alone again, Rose had sat at her kitchen table and begun writing out everything they had learned from James Mercer. When she finished, it was past midnight. She had made 3 copies as planned, putting one in an envelope for Rachel, one for the safety deposit box, and one to give to Roberts. Then she had looked at the other information spread across her table: Daniel's calendar, notes from her research, the timeline of Stone's business career. Pieces of a puzzle that were slowly coming together. The cell phone records would be crucial. If they showed Daniel away from his computer during the transfers, that would be tangible evidence someone else had used his credentials. Combined with Mercer's information about Stone's pattern of behavior, it might be enough to create reasonable doubt in a jury's mind. But Stone was clearly ruthless. If he discovered what Rose was doing, he might try to stop her, through threats, intimidation, or worse. She needed to be careful, to protect herself and the evidence she was gathering. Tomorrow she would check in with Roberts about the cell phone records. She would also try to locate Peter Rodriguez in Arizona, another victim who might be willing to share his story. For now, though, Rose needed rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new information, perhaps new dangers. But also, hopefully, one step closer to the truth that would free her son. As she prepared for bed, Rose looked at the photograph of James that still sat on her bedside table. "I won't let them take Daniel from me," she whispered to her husband's smiling face. "I promise you that." In the darkness of her bedroom, Rose felt a resolve hardening within her. Stone had picked the wrong mother to mess with. He might be powerful, wealthy, connected. But Rose Parker had something stronger on her side, a mother's love and a determination that would not be broken. The battle was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. And Rose Parker was ready to fight with everything she had. The small cafe on the corner of the city Connor and 4th was nearly empty at this early hour. Rose Parker sat in a booth by the window, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, trying to calm her nerves. Across from her, her sister Rachel checked her watch for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. "He's late," Rachel whispered. "Maybe he's not coming." "He'll be here," Rose assured her, though her own confidence was wavering. He sounded sincere on the phone. They were waiting for Peter Rodriguez, the second known victim of Richard Stone's scheme. After learning about him from James Mercer, Rose had spent days tracking him down. She had finally located him working at a regional bank in Phoenix, Arizona. To her surprise, he had agreed to fly in for a meeting after hearing Daniel's story. "My flight gets in at 6 a.m. Friday," Rodriguez had told her during their brief phone conversation. "I can meet you at 7:30, but I need to be on a return flight by noon. I can't risk being away longer than that." The urgency and secrecy had concerned Rose, but she understood his caution. If Stone had threatened Rodriguez's family as he had Mercer's, any contact with Rose was a risk. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and both women looked up. A man in his early 40s entered, scanning the room with wary eyes. He was shorter than Rose had expected, with salt and pepper hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore a plain navy suit and carried a small laptop bag. When his eyes met Rose's, a flash of recognition passed between them, not of faces but of shared experience, shared pain. Rose raised her hand slightly and the man nodded, making his way to their booth. "Mrs. Parker?" he asked quietly. "Mr. Rodriguez," Rose replied, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming. This is my sister, Rachel." Rodriguez shook their hands briefly before sliding into the booth across from them. He glanced over his shoulder toward the door before speaking. "I can't stay long," he said, his voice low. "If Stone finds out I'm talking to you—" "I understand," Rose assured him. "We'll be brief. I just need to know what happened between you and Richard Stone, anything that might help my son." Rodriguez signaled to the waitress for coffee, then leaned forward. "What do you know already?" "I know Stone sets up partnerships with talented individuals, frames them for financial theft, then walks away with the money and the business," Rose summarized. "I know he's done it at least 3 times before my son, to you, to James Mercer, and to Sarah Chen." Rodriguez nodded grimly. 4 times that we know of. There could be others." "4?" Rachel asked. "Who is the 4th?" "A man named David Levine, before Chen. I found out about him during my own investigation, but I could never locate him. Rumor was he left the country after his case with Stone." Rose made a note of the name in her small notebook. "Can you tell us specifically what happened in your case? The details might help us understand Stone's methods." Rodriguez took a sip of the coffee the waitress had brought, gathering his thoughts. I was a financial analyst at Weatherby Capital when Stone approached me. Said he'd been watching my career, that I had a unique talent for spotting market trends. Offered me a partnership in a new investment advisory firm, Stone and Rodriguez Advisors. The pattern was so similar to Daniel's experience that Rose felt a chill despite the warm cafe. The first 6 months were amazing, Rodriguez continued. Stone handled the client recruitment, the marketing, the public face of the company. I handled the actual investment strategy, the portfolio management, the day-to-day operations. We were growing fast, taking on high net worth clients, making good returns. Then the money disappeared, Rose guessed. Rodriguez nodded. $4 million from our operating account. Stone called me in on a Sunday morning, showed me transaction records indicating I had moved the money to a personal account in the Cayman Islands. My login credentials, my password, my electronic signature, all used to authorize the transfers. But you hadn't done it, Rachel said. Of course not. I had no idea how to even set up an offshore account, but the evidence was perfect. Stone called the police while I was still in his office. I was arrested on the spot. Rose leaned forward. How did he get your login information, your passwords? Rodriguez's expression darkened. The same way he gets everyone's, I suspect. About a month into our partnership, Stone suggested we use a password management system for the company. Said it was more secure, would generate complex passwords automatically, and store them safely. He set it up himself on all our company computers. Rose felt a surge of excitement. This confirmed her suspicion about how Stone had accessed Daniel's credentials. Did you go to trial? She asked. Rodriguez shook his head. No. While I was in jail awaiting trial, someone approached my wife in a grocery store parking lot, showed her pictures of our children at school, at soccer practice, at a friend's birthday party, said it would be a shame if anything happened to such beautiful kids. His voice broke slightly. I took a plea deal the next day. 18 months in a minimum security facility in exchange for returning the stolen funds, which I never had in the first place. My wife sold our house to pay Stone, moved in with her parents. By the time I got out, my career was ruined, my marriage was strained, and I was a convicted felon. Rose reached across the table and squeezed Rodriguez's hand. I'm so sorry. What Stone did to you, to all of you, is monstrous. What I don't understand, Rachel interjected, is why. Stone is already wealthy. Why go through such elaborate schemes for a few $1 million? Rodriguez smiled bitterly. That's what I couldn't figure out either, until about a year after my release. He opened his laptop bag and removed a manila folder, sliding it across the table to Rose. Take a look at these, but be careful who sees them. Rose opened the folder to find printouts of financial statements, corporate filings, and transaction records. She scanned them quickly, not immediately understanding their significance. What am I looking at? She asked. The real scheme, Rodriguez replied. Stone doesn't care about the $3 or $4 or $5 million he claims was stolen. That's just the cover story. What he's really doing is using these partnerships to launder much larger sums of money from his other businesses. Rose looked up sharply. Money laundering. Exactly. Stone's legitimate businesses, real estate developments, import-export operations, private equity funds, they're not all as legitimate as they appear. Some of them are generating millions in unreported income, likely from illegal activities. He needs to clean that money to make it appear legitimate. Rodriguez pointed to one of the documents. These are banking records from Stone Enterprises showing cash inflows of $12 million in the 3 months before our partnership collapsed. The source is listed as investment returns from a development project in Eastern Europe, but I checked, that project doesn't exist. So the dirty money comes into Stone's main business, Rose reasoned, following the thread, then moves into the partnership as startup capital. Then, when the partnership implodes amid accusations of theft, Rodriguez continued, Stone takes control of all assets, including the laundered money, which now has a paper trail making it look legitimate. The stolen money is just a distraction, a way to explain why the partnership failed while hiding the larger scheme. Rose felt the pieces clicking into place. This wasn't just about framing innocent people for theft. It was about using those people as unwitting accomplices in a complex money laundering operation. How did you get these documents? Rachel asked, a note of concern in her voice. If Stone discovers you have them, I still had friends in the financial industry, Rodriguez explained, people who believed in my innocence and were willing to help discreetly. I've been gathering evidence for years, building a case against Stone, but I can't come forward myself, not with the threats against my family. But if others came forward with you, Rose suggested. Mercer, my son, all of Stone's victims together? Rodriguez shook his head. Mercer won't risk his son. Car accident that I'm convinced wasn't an accident. Levine is gone. And your son is currently in jail, his credibility destroyed. Stone knows what he's doing. He isolates his victims, ensures they can't or won't fight back. I'm fighting back, Rose said firmly. And I won't stop until my son is free and Stone is exposed. Rodriguez studied her with a mixture of admiration and concern. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, Mrs. Parker, or the most foolish. Stone is dangerous, more dangerous than you realize. He has connections, police, judges, politicians. Why do you think none of us could get justice through the system? Rose thought of Daniel, alone in a jail cell for a crime he didn't commit. She thought of Mercer, living in exile from his former life, of Rodriguez, separated from his family by fear, of Chen, who might have paid the ultimate price for crossing Stone. I have no choice, she said simply. He has my son. Rodriguez nodded, understanding in his eyes. I'll help however I can, but there's a limit to what I can do openly. My family, I would never ask you to put your family at risk, Rose assured him. Your information alone is invaluable. If we can prove Stone is laundering money through these partnerships, it gives us a motive for framing Daniel. There's something else, Rodriguez said, lowering his voice further. Something I discovered recently. Stone has a partner in all this, someone who helps him set up the technical side of the frame, the fake transactions, the electronic signatures, the offshore accounts. Who? Rose asked eagerly. I don't have a name, but I have evidence they exist. In each case, mine, Mercer's, Chen's, and I suspect your son's, there were 2 IP addresses accessing the financial systems when the fraudulent transfers were made. One from Stone's office and one from an unknown location, using high-end anonymization techniques to hide their true identity. It's always the same pattern. This aligned with what Rose had learned about IP addresses in her research. So Stone has a technical accomplice who helps him frame his partners. Yes, someone skilled in cybersecurity and financial systems. Find that person, and you might find the weakness in Stone's operation. The conversation was interrupted by Rodriguez's phone buzzing. He checked it, his expression immediately tightening. I need to go, he said, gathering his things quickly. My flight's been moved up. Changed by whom? Rachel asked, alarmed. I don't know, and I don't want to find out, Rodriguez replied. He pushed the folder toward Rose. Keep these, use them, but be careful. He scribbled something on a napkin and passed it to her. This is a secure email address. Use it if you find anything concrete against Stone. I'll do what I can behind the scenes. Before Rose could thank him, Rodriguez was gone, slipping out the cafe door and into a waiting taxi. Rachel looked at the folder with concern. Do you think it's safe to keep these? If Stone finds out, we'll make copies, Rose decided. Keep them in different locations, and we need to get them to Roberts as soon as possible. This is evidence of Stone's real motive for framing Daniel. As they paid for their coffee and left the cafe, Rose couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. She scanned the street but saw nothing unusual. Just morning commuters, a mail carrier delivering packages, a man reading a newspaper on a bench. Let's take different routes home, Rose suggested to Rachel, just to be safe. Meet me at my apartment in an hour. Rachel squeezed her hand. Be careful, Rose. This is bigger than we thought. I know, but we're closer to the truth. I can feel it. Rose spent the next week combing through the documents Rodriguez had provided, cross-referencing them with what she had learned about Stone's business practices. The picture that emerged was disturbing. A sophisticated money laundering operation using a series of partnerships as fronts with innocent people framed for financial crimes to hide the real scheme. She had shared everything with Roberts, Daniel's lawyer, who had been initially skeptical but increasingly convinced as he reviewed the evidence. This gives us a motive, Roberts had acknowledged during their meeting. Stone isn't just stealing the partnership money, he's using the whole arrangement to launder much larger sums from other sources. It's compelling. Compelling enough for reasonable doubt? Rose had pressed. Roberts had hesitated. Maybe. But we still need direct evidence that Daniel didn't make those transfers. The cell phone records are our best hope for that. The cell phone records that Roberts had subpoenaed had finally arrived, and Rose was eager to review them. She had spread them across her kitchen table alongside Daniel's calendar, looking for discrepancies, times when Daniel's phone location showed he was away from the office during the fraudulent transfers. The work was painstaking, comparing timestamps from the transfers with Daniel's phone records and calendar entries. But after hours of careful analysis, Rose found what she was looking for. "There!" she had exclaimed to an empty apartment, October 18th, 2:15 p.m., a transfer of $250,000 from the company account to Daniel's personal account. But according to his phone records, he was at Riverside Park at that time, 3 miles from the office, and his calendar shows he was meeting a client for coffee nearby. Rose had continued comparing records, finding 2 more instances where Daniel's phone location definitively placed him away from the office during fraudulent transfers. This was exactly the evidence they needed, proof that someone else had used Daniel's credentials to move money while he was elsewhere. She had called Roberts immediately. "I found 3 transfers that happened when Daniel was provably away from his computer. His phone records confirm it." "That's excellent," Roberts had replied, sounding genuinely excited for the first time since taking the case. "This is exactly the kind of concrete evidence we need. Combined with the information about Stone's pattern of behavior and the money laundering operation, we have the beginnings of a solid defense." Rose had felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Finally, tangible evidence of Daniel's innocence. Evidence that could free him. "There's one more thing we need," Roberts had continued. "If Stone has a technical accomplice, as Rodriguez suggested, finding that person could break this case wide open. They might be willing to testify against Stone in exchange for immunity." "How do we find them?" Rose had asked. Rodriguez said they use anonymization techniques to hide their identity. "Every system has vulnerabilities," Roberts had replied. "Let me consult with a cybersecurity expert I know. In the meantime, keep digging. You've already uncovered more than I thought possible." The praise had warmed Rose, but she knew they still had a long way to go. Stone was powerful, connected, and dangerous. He wouldn't go down without a fight. 2 days later, Rose received an unexpected call from Roberts. "Mrs. Parker, I need you to come to my office immediately," he had said, his voice urgent. "There's been a development." Rose had hurried to the small law office downtown, her mind racing with possibilities. Had they identified Stone's accomplice, found new evidence, or had something gone wrong? When she arrived, Roberts ushered her quickly into his office, closing the door behind them. His expression was grim. "What's happened?" Rose had asked, fear tightening her chest. Roberts had gestured to a chair. "Please, sit down. What I'm about to tell you is disturbing." Rose had remained standing. "Tell me." "I consulted with a cybersecurity expert about the IP addresses Rodriguez mentioned, the ones accessing the financial systems during the fraudulent transfers. He was able to trace one of them to a specific location." Roberts had paused, seeming reluctant to continue. "Where?" Rose had demanded. "Where did it come from?" "A coffee shop called The Daily Grind, about 2 blocks from Stone's office. The expert was able to access their security camera footage from the dates of the transfers." "And?" Rose had pressed, sensing there was more. Roberts had taken a deep breath. "The footage shows someone using a laptop during the exact times of the transfers, someone we recognize." He had turned his computer monitor toward Rose and played a video file. The grainy security footage showed a coffee shop interior. Roberts had paused the video on a frame showing a person sitting in a corner booth, working intently on a laptop. Rose had leaned closer, then stepped back in shock. The person in the footage was Daniel. "No," she had whispered. "This can't be right. Daniel was elsewhere during those transfers. His phone records prove it." "His phone was elsewhere," Roberts had corrected gently. "Daniel appears to have left his phone somewhere else, perhaps with a friend or in his car, while he made the transfers from this coffee shop." Rose had shaken her head vehemently. "No. I don't believe it. This must be fabricated. Stone must have altered the footage somehow." "I thought of that," Roberts had admitted, "but my expert examined it thoroughly. It's authentic footage from multiple angles, time-stamped and verified. And there's more." He had clicked to another video file. This is from the bank where the account was opened, the one the money was transferred to. It shows Daniel opening the account 3 weeks before the first transfer. The second video clearly showed Daniel at a bank teller's window, filling out paperwork, smiling and chatting with the bank employee. Rose had sunk into the chair, her legs no longer able to support her. There must be an explanation, she had insisted, though her voice had lost its certainty. Daniel wouldn't. Mrs. Parker, Roberts had interrupted gently. I understand this is difficult to accept, but we need to consider the possibility that Daniel may not have been entirely truthful with you. No, Rose had said firmly, finding her strength again. I know my son. He would never steal. There's more to this. There has to be. Roberts had sighed. I want to believe that too, but the evidence has been manipulated before, Rose had reminded him. Stone framed those other partners with perfect evidence too. Why should this be any different? Because we have video footage of Daniel himself, not just digital records that could be manipulated, Roberts had explained patiently. Unless you believe Stone hired a body double or used some kind of advanced technology to fake Daniel's appearance in multiple videos from different locations. The suggestion had sounded absurd when stated plainly. Rose had sat in silence, trying to process what she was seeing, what it might mean. Could Daniel have actually taken the money? No, she refused to believe that. But the videos. I need to talk to Daniel, she had decided. Now, today. Roberts had nodded. I've already arranged a special visitation at the jail. The car is waiting outside. The jail visiting room had felt colder than usual as Rose waited for Daniel to be brought in. Her mind was still reeling from the videos Roberts had shown her. There had to be an explanation that preserved Daniel's innocence. There had to be. When Daniel had entered, Rose had studied his face carefully, looking for signs of deception, of guilt. But all she saw was her son, tired, stressed, but with the same honest eyes he had always had. Mom, he had greeted her warmly. I wasn't expecting you today. Is everything okay? Rose had decided not to ease into the conversation. Daniel, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to tell me the absolute truth. Daniel's smile had faltered at her serious tone. Of course, Mom. What is it? Did you take the money? The question had hung in the air between them. Daniel's expression had shifted from confusion to hurt. Mom, how can you ask me that? You know I didn't. Then how do you explain the security footage showing you at the Daily Grind coffee shop, making transfers on a laptop, at the exact times money was moved from the company account to yours? How do you explain the bank video showing you opening the account where the money was sent? Daniel's face had gone pale. What? That's impossible. I never... He had stopped abruptly, his eyes widening with a sudden realization. Wait, the Daily Grind? I do go there sometimes, but I never made any transfers from there, and I never opened a secret bank account. The videos clearly show you, Daniel, Rose had pressed, not someone who looks like you. You. Daniel had run his hands through his hair, his distress evident. Mom, I swear I didn't take that money. I don't understand how those videos exist. He had paused, thinking. Unless what? There was a day, about a month before all this happened, when Stone suggested we meet at the Daily Grind instead of the office. He said he wanted to show me a new investment tracking system he was considering for our firm. He had me log into a demo account on his laptop, enter some sample data, said he wanted to see how intuitive the interface was for someone seeing it for the first time. Rose had leaned forward. Did you enter your actual login credentials? No, it was a demo account with preset login information. But, Daniel had frowned, thinking back. Stone stepped away to take a call at one point, leaving me with the laptop. When he came back, he was using his phone to record something. Said he was documenting the process for the software company. I didn't think anything of it at the time. He was recording you using the laptop, Rose had realized. Creating video that could be edited later to make it look like you were doing something else entirely. Is that possible? Daniel had asked. With the right technology, yes. Rodriguez said Stone has a technical accomplice, someone skilled in cybersecurity. They could potentially create convincing deepfake videos. Daniel had looked confused. Rodriguez? Who's Rodriguez? Rose had quickly explained about Peter Rodriguez, James Mercer, and the pattern of fraud she had uncovered. Daniel had listened with growing understanding. "So I'm not the first," he had said when she finished. "Stone has done this before, multiple times." "Yes, and he's not just stealing the partnership money. He's using the partnerships to launder much larger sums from his other businesses, possibly illegal operations." Daniel had sat back, absorbing this information. That explains so much. The way he insisted on handling all client recruitment himself, the way certain large deposits would come in from investors he never identified, the way he was always asking about our security protocols, our transaction verification processes. "Daniel," Rose had said urgently, "think carefully. The bank video shows you opening an account. Did you ever go to a bank with Stone?" Daniel's brow had furrowed in concentration. "Yes, actually. About 3 weeks before everything fell apart, Stone said he wanted to open a separate account for a special investment opportunity, something exclusive for our highest value clients. He asked me to come along because he said it would primarily be my responsibility to manage. But when we got there, he did most of the talking. I just signed some paperwork he put in front of me." "Did you read what you were signing?" Rose had asked, already suspecting the answer. Daniel had looked down, embarrassed. "Not carefully enough, apparently. Stone was talking the whole time, explaining the investment strategy. I trusted him. I signed where he indicated." "You were opening the account that would later receive the stolen money," Rose had realized. "Stone made you an unwitting accomplice in your own framing." "How do we prove that?" Daniel had asked, desperation in his voice. "The videos look real because they are real. It's really me in them. But the context, the purpose, was completely different from what it appears." Rose had reached across the table and taken her son's hands. "We'll find a way to prove it. Stone made one mistake. He didn't know I would fight this hard for you. He didn't know I would uncover his entire operation. And most importantly, he didn't know I would never, ever believe you could steal anything from anyone." Daniel's eyes had filled with tears. "Thank you, Mom, for believing in me when no one else would." "I'm your mother," Rose had said simply. "I know your heart." As their visit ended and Daniel was led back to his cell, Rose had felt a renewed determination. The videos complicated things, but they didn't change the fundamental truth. Daniel was innocent, and Stone was guilty. Now they just needed to prove how Stone had manipulated both Daniel and the evidence. Back at her apartment, Rose had called Roberts to share what Daniel had told her about the coffee shop meeting and the bank visit with Stone. "It's plausible," Roberts had admitted. "Stone could have staged those scenarios specifically to create video evidence that could be used against Daniel later. The question is, can we prove it? There must be some way to show the videos don't represent what they appear to," Rose had insisted. "Some technical analysis that could reveal tampering or editing. My expert is already examining them for signs of deepfake technology or other manipulation," Roberts had assured her. "But even if the videos themselves are authentic, we might be able to prove they've been taken out of context. For instance, if we can show that the laptop Daniel was using at the Daily Grind wasn't actually connecting to the company's financial system at that time." "How would we do that?" Rose had asked. "We'd need the coffee shop's internet records, showing what websites were accessed from their network on those dates. If Daniel was really just testing a demo investment system, not accessing the company's actual accounts, that would support his story." "Can you get those records?" "I'll try." "But we're running out of time, Mrs. Parker. The trial starts in 2 weeks. Stone's lawyers will present these videos as evidence, and they're compelling. We need something equally compelling to counter them." After hanging up, Rose had paced her apartment, thinking. They needed a breakthrough, something that would definitively prove Stone's guilt, or at least create reasonable doubt about Daniel's. She had returned to the kitchen table, to the documents Rodriguez had provided. There had to be something they were missing, some connection they hadn't made yet. One document had caught her attention, a list of Stone's business associates, including board members, partners, and key employees across his various companies. Rose had scanned the names, not expecting to recognize any of them, until she reached one near the bottom. William Tanner, Chief Technology Officer, Stone Digital Security. William Tanner. The name had struck a chord in Rose's memory, but she couldn't immediately place it. She had pulled out her notebook, flipping through pages of notes from her investigation. There, a mention of a Will Tanner who had briefly worked at Daniel's accounting firm before leaving for another opportunity about 6 months before Stone approached Daniel. Rose had felt a chill. Could this be Stone's technical accomplice? Someone who had worked at Daniel's firm, who might have had access to information about Daniel's work habits, his skills, his potential as a target. She had quickly searched online for information about William Tanner. His LinkedIn profile showed he had indeed worked at Daniel's accounting firm before joining Stone Digital Security. His expertise was in financial cybersecurity, specifically protecting financial systems from fraud, or perhaps creating it. Rose had called Roberts again, her voice urgent. "I think I've found Stone's accomplice, a man named William Tanner. He worked at Daniel's accounting firm before joining Stone's company. He's a cybersecurity expert specializing in financial systems." "That fits the profile," Roberts had agreed. Someone who knew about Daniel professionally, who could have identified him as a potential target for Stone. Someone with the technical skills to help create the perfect frame. "We need to find him," Rose had decided. If he's Stone's accomplice, he might know how the videos were manipulated or taken out of context. He might even be willing to testify against Stone to save himself. "I'll start looking into him immediately," Roberts had promised. "This could be the break we've been waiting for." After hanging up, Rose had sat back, a mix of hope and trepidation filling her. They were getting closer to the truth, closer to exposing Stone's operation and freeing Daniel. But they were also entering increasingly dangerous territory. If Stone realized they had identified his accomplice, he might take desperate measures to protect himself. Rose had looked at the photograph of James on her bedside table, drawing strength from his memory. "We're close, James," she had whispered, "so close to bringing Daniel home." Outside her apartment window, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. Somewhere out there, Richard Stone was going about his business, confident in his scheme, unaware that a determined mother was slowly unraveling the web of deception he had so carefully constructed. The final battle was approaching, and Rose Parker was ready. What do you think of Stone's elaborate scheme? If you were in Rose's position, would you have the courage to keep fighting against such a powerful opponent? Comment: "Mother's courage deserves respect" below if you admire Rose's determination to save her son. 1 week before Daniel's trial, Rose Parker sat across from Thomas Roberts in his cramped law office. The walls were lined with overstuffed filing cabinets, and the desk between them was buried under stacks of documents, police reports, financial records, witness statements, and the growing evidence of Richard Stone's criminal enterprise. "We're running out of time," Roberts said, removing his glasses to rub his tired eyes. "The trial starts Monday, and while we've uncovered a lot about Stone's pattern of behavior, we still don't have definitive proof that the videos have been manipulated or taken out of context." "What about William Tanner?" Rose asked. "Have you been able to locate him?" Roberts shook his head. "He's gone. Left Stone Digital Security 3 weeks ago, right after Daniel's arrest. His apartment is vacant. His phone is disconnected. It's like he vanished." "Stone must have sent him away," Rose reasoned, "to make sure he couldn't be questioned or subpoenaed." "Probably," Roberts agreed. "But without Tanner, we have no direct link between Stone and the technical aspects of the frame-up." Rose felt frustration building inside her. They had come so far, uncovered so much, yet the final piece of the puzzle remained elusive. "What about the coffee shop internet records?" she asked. "Did you get them?" "Yes, but they're not as helpful as we hoped. The Daily Grinds network was accessed by dozens of customers that day. Without knowing which device Daniel was using, we can't prove what websites he was or wasn't visiting." Rose drummed her fingers on the armrest of her chair, thinking. There has to be something we're missing, some way to prove what really happened. Roberts hesitated, then reached for a folder on his desk. "There's one option we haven't discussed yet. It's a long shot and it has risks, but given our limited time," he slid the folder toward Rose. "This is a plea agreement offered by the prosecutor, 5 years instead of 20. Daniel would have to admit guilt, but—" "No," Rose interrupted firmly, pushing the folder away without opening it. "Daniel is innocent. We're not accepting any deal that requires him to say otherwise." "Mrs. Parker," Roberts said gently, "I understand your position. but from a legal standpoint, with the evidence as it currently stands. The evidence is a lie, Rose insisted. Daniel didn't take that money, and I won't let him plead guilty to something he didn't do. Robert sighed, replacing the folder in his desk drawer. Then we need to find something substantial in the next few days. Something that directly challenges the prosecution's evidence. Rose stood up, gathering her purse. I'll keep looking. There has to be a way to expose what Stone has done. As she reached the door, Roberts called after her. Mrs. Parker. She turned back to him. For what it's worth, I believe Daniel's innocent. I just don't know if we can prove it in time. We will, Rose replied with a conviction she didn't entirely feel. We have to. Outside the law office, the afternoon sun was warm on Rose's face as she walked to the bus stop. Her mind raced with possibilities, with fragments of information they had gathered, searching for connections they might have missed. William Tanner was key. He was the technical expert who had helped Stone frame Daniel and presumably the other partners before him. His sudden disappearance just after Daniel's arrest was too convenient to be coincidence. If they could find Tanner, convince him to testify. But how to find someone who didn't want to be found? As Rose boarded the bus, a new thought occurred to her. If Tanner had helped frame multiple partners over the years, he would have accumulated a lot of dangerous knowledge about Stone's operations. Stone might not be content to simply send Tanner away. He might want to ensure Tanner could never talk. The bus lurched forward, carrying Rose back toward her apartment. What if Tanner wasn't hiding voluntarily? What if he was being held somewhere, or worse? The possibility sent a chill through her. By the time she reached her stop, Rose had made a decision. If the legal approach wasn't yielding results fast enough, perhaps it was time for something more direct, something Stone wouldn't anticipate. It was time to confront Richard Stone himself. Stone Enterprises occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming glass tower in the financial district. Rose stood across the street, observing the steady stream of well-dressed professionals entering and exiting the building. Security guards monitored the main entrance, checking IDs and signing in visitors. Rose had dressed carefully for this confrontation, a simple but elegant navy dress she had bought years ago for special occasions, her best shoes, hair neatly styled. She wanted to appear respectable, someone who belonged in the world of business and finance, not a desperate mother who could be easily dismissed. Crossing the street, she approached the reception desk with confident steps. Good afternoon, she said to the young man behind the desk. I have an appointment with Mr. Stone. The receptionist checked his computer screen. Your name, ma'am? Rose Parker. She held her breath, waiting for recognition, for alarm bells to sound. But the young man simply nodded. I don't see you in the system. Let me call up to Mr. Stone's office. As he reached for the phone, Rose quickly added, Actually, it's with his assistant, Ms. Bradford, regarding the charity gala next month. This was a gamble. She had researched Stone's staff online and found that his executive assistant was indeed named Jennifer Bradford. Whether there was a charity gala planned was anyone's guess. The receptionist hesitated, then set down the phone. I'll need to see some ID for your visitor badge. Rose presented her driver's license, keeping her expression neutral as he examined it. He seemed to show no recognition of her name, no connection to Daniel Parker, the man his boss had accused of embezzlement. Here you go, Mrs. Parker, the receptionist said, handing her a visitor badge. Stone Enterprises is on floors 30 through 32. Mr. Stone's office is on 32. Ms. Bradford will need to meet you at the elevator to escort you up. Thank you, Rose replied, clipping the badge to her dress. That presented a problem. She had no way to contact Bradford, who certainly wasn't expecting her, but fortune favored the bold. As Rose approached the security turnstiles, a woman in a sharp business suit was just coming through from the other direction. Excuse me, Rose said. Are you from Stone Enterprises? Yes, marketing department, the woman replied with a distracted smile. I have a meeting upstairs, but I'm running late. Could you possibly escort me to the elevators? I'd be so grateful. The woman glanced at Rose's visitor badge. Sure, come on through. Minutes later, Rose was in an elevator ascending to the 32nd floor. Her heart pounded, but she kept her expression calm. The hardest part was yet to come. When the doors opened, Rose stepped out into a reception area with sleek modern furniture and abstract art on the walls. A young woman sat behind a curved desk, typing on a computer. May I help you? She asked, looking up at Rose. Jennifer Bradford, Rose guessed, hoping she had correctly identified Stone's assistant. No, I'm Melanie. Ms. Bradford is in a meeting. Do you have an appointment? Rose decided to change tactics. No, but I need to see Mr. Stone immediately. My name is Rose Parker. I'm Daniel Parker's mother. Melanie's eyes widened with recognition. Mrs. Parker, I don't think... Please tell Mr. Stone I'm here, Rose interrupted firmly. Tell him I have information about William Tanner that he'll want to hear. It was another gamble. If Stone had nothing to hide, the name would mean little to him. But if Tanner was indeed his accomplice in multiple fraud schemes, the mention might provoke a reaction. And Melanie hesitated, then picked up her phone and spoke quietly into it. After a moment, she looked up at Rose with surprise. Mr. Stone will see you. Please follow me. Rose's gamble had paid off. The mention of Tanner had opened Stone's door. Now she just needed to make the most of this opportunity. Melanie led her down a hallway lined with photographs of Stone at various business openings, charity events, and award ceremonies, the carefully crafted public image of a successful and philanthropic businessman. At the end of the hall was a large wooden door. Melanie knocked, then opened it. Mrs. Parker to see you, Mr. Stone, she announced, stepping aside to let Rose enter. Richard Stone's office was exactly what Rose had expected, spacious with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. A massive desk dominated one end, while a seating area with leather couches occupied the other. The walls were adorned with expensive art and framed awards. Stone himself stood by the windows, his back to the door. He was dressed in a tailored gray suit that emphasized his tall, lean frame. His silver hair caught the afternoon sunlight, creating a halo effect that seemed inappropriately angelic for a man Rose now knew to be anything but. Mrs. Parker, he said without turning around. This is unexpected. Is it? Rose replied, stepping further into the office. I would think you'd expect a mother to fight for her innocent son. Stone turned then, his face composed into an expression of practiced sympathy. I understand your position, Mrs. Parker. No mother wants to believe her child capable of theft. But the evidence is a fabrication, Rose interrupted, just like the evidence against James Mercer, and Peter Rodriguez, and Sarah Chen, and David Levine. Something flashed in Stone's eyes. Surprise, concern, perhaps even fear, but it was quickly masked. I don't know what you're talking about, he said smoothly. Please, have a seat. He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Rose remained standing. Yeah, I know everything, Mr. Stone. About your pattern of framing business partners for financial crimes they didn't commit. About using these partnerships to launder money from your other businesses. About how you threatened Mercer's son and Rodriguez's family when they tried to fight back. Stone's expression hardened. He moved to his desk and pressed a button on his phone. Melanie, hold my calls, and please ask security to come up to my office. That won't be necessary, Rose said calmly. I'm not here to threaten you or cause a scene. I just want my son released and the charges against him dropped. Stone released the button, studying Rose with new interest. You've been busy, Mrs. Parker. I underestimated you. Most people do, Rose replied. It's amazing what a mother will do for her child. Stone gestured again to the chair. Please, sit. If we're going to have this conversation, we might as well be comfortable. This time, Rose accepted the seat. Stone settled into his chair behind the desk, creating a physical barrier between them. So, he said, folding his hands on the desktop, you've spoken with some disgruntled former associates of mine and constructed an elaborate conspiracy theory. But you must realize how this sounds. A respected businessman secretly framing multiple partners over many years? For what purpose? Money laundering, Rose stated simply. Your legitimate businesses are fronts for cleaning illegal funds. The partnerships create a paper trail that makes the money appear legitimate. The theft accusations are just a cover story to explain why the partnerships fail and why you take full control of the assets. Stone's smile didn't reach his eyes. That's quite a tale, Mrs. Parker. Do you have any actual evidence of these claims? We have the pattern, Rose replied. 4 partners before Daniel, all accused of similar thefts, all with similar evidence against them. We have banking records showing mysterious cash inflows to your businesses that don't match reported income sources. We have testimony from former partners about how you threatened them to prevent them from fighting the charges. Hearsay and circumstantial evidence, Stone dismissed. Nothing that would stand up in court. Perhaps, Rose acknowledged. But what about the videos, the ones showing Daniel at the daily grind and at the bank? Daniel told me about those meetings, how you manipulated him into positions that could later be used against him, how you recorded him using a laptop with a demo investment system, not making fraudulent transfers, how you had him sign documents for what he thought was a special client account, not a personal account to receive stolen funds. Stone's expression remained neutral, but his fingers tapped lightly on the desk, a small tell of agitation. Again, your son's word against documented evidence. The videos clearly show. The videos show what you wanted them to show, Rose interrupted. Context is everything, Mr. Stone, and I believe William Tanner helped you manipulate that context. At the mention of Tanner's name again, Stone's fingers stopped tapping. You seem fixated on this Tanner person. A former employee who left for personal reasons. What relevance does he have to your son's case? Tanner worked at Daniel's accounting firm before joining your company. He's a cybersecurity expert who specializes in financial systems. He's the technical brain behind your operation, the one who creates the perfect digital evidence for your frame-ups. And now he's conveniently disappeared right after Daniel's arrest. Stone's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Mrs. Parker, I admire your dedication to your son. Truly, I do. But you're grasping at straws, connecting dots that aren't there. Your son stole money from our partnership. The evidence is clear. All these elaborate theories won't change that fact. Rose leaned forward. Where is Tanner, Mr. Stone? I have no idea. As I said, he left the company. People move on. Did he? Or did you send him away to make sure he couldn't testify? Or perhaps something more permanent? Stone's face darkened. Be careful, Mrs. Parker. That sounds dangerously like an accusation of murder. Not an accusation, Rose clarified. A question. Just like I question what really happened to Sarah Chen. A single vehicle accident late at night. Very convenient for you. Stone stood abruptly. This conversation is over. I've humored you out of respect for your position as a concerned mother, but I won't sit here and listen to unfounded accusations of criminal activity. Rose remained seated, her voice steady. Drop the charges against Daniel, and all of this goes away. The evidence we've gathered, the testimonies from your former partners, the financial records showing your money laundering operation, all of it stays private. Stone's laugh was cold. Are you attempting to blackmail me, Mrs. Parker? I'm offering you a way out, Rose corrected, one that doesn't end with you in prison. And if I refuse, then everything we've uncovered goes to the FBI, the SEC, and every major news outlet in the country. Your empire crumbles, your reputation is destroyed, your freedom is forfeit. Stone walked to the windows again, looking out over the city he had built his empire upon. When he turned back, his expression was calculating. You're bluffing, he decided. If you had evidence strong enough to convince the authorities, you would have gone to them already instead of coming here. Rose nodded, acknowledging the point. Our evidence isn't complete. Not yet. But it's enough to start an investigation. And once they start looking, really looking, at your businesses, your partnerships, your banking records, well, I suspect they'll find much more than we have. Stone returned to his desk, sitting down again. Let's say, hypothetically, that I were to consider your proposal. How would it work? I can't simply make criminal charges disappear. You can tell the truth, Rose replied. Admit that you made a mistake. That after further review of the company's records, you discovered the transfers were legitimate business expenses that were incorrectly categorized. That there was no theft, just an accounting error. Stone steepled his fingers, thinking. And in return? In return, we keep what we know to ourselves. Daniel gets his life back. You continue your business activities, though I would suggest finding a new method for laundering your money. This one has become rather predictable. A smile ghosted across Stone's face. Mrs. Parker, in another life, you might have made an excellent businesswoman. You have an unexpected talent for negotiation. I'm not negotiating, Rose clarified. I'm telling you how this ends. One way or another, my son will be free. The only question is whether you go down in the process. Stone studied her for a long moment. I'll need time to consider my options. The trial starts Monday, Rose reminded him. You have until Friday to make your decision. After that, we proceed with our defense, which will necessarily involve exposing everything we know about your operation. She stood, smoothing her dress. I'll see myself out. As she reached the door, Stone called after her. Mrs. Parker, she turned back to him. You're either very brave or very foolish, coming here alone, making these claims, these demands. Rose met his gaze steadily. A mother protecting her child is both, Mr. Stone. Remember that when you make your decision. You did what? Rachel exclaimed when Rose told her about the confrontation with Stone. They sat in Rose's kitchen, cups of tea growing cold between them. I went to see Stone, Rose repeated calmly. Told him what we know, offered him a choice, drop the charges against Daniel or we expose his entire operation. Rose, that man is dangerous. He threatened Mercer's son, Rodriguez's family. Chen ended up dead. What were you thinking, confronting him alone? I was thinking that we're running out of time, Rose replied. The trial starts Monday, and we still don't have definitive proof of Daniel's innocence. This was our best option. Rachel shook her head in disbelief. Did it ever occur to you that Stone might decide to solve his problem by making you disappear? Just like Tanner? Just like Chen? He won't, Rose said with more confidence than she felt. It would be too suspicious, too close to Daniel's trial. And besides, I took precautions. She patted her purse. I recorded our entire conversation. If anything happens to me, multiple copies of that recording will be delivered to the authorities, along with all the evidence we've gathered. Rachel stared at her sister. Who are you, and what have you done with my cautious, play-by-the-rules sister? Rose smiled slightly. She discovered that sometimes the rules don't protect the innocent. Sometimes you have to make your own rules. Well, what's done is done, Rachel sighed. Do you think Stone will accept your terms? Rose considered the question. I don't know. He's calculating. He'll weigh the risks, the possibility that our evidence isn't as strong as I implied against the damage even an incomplete investigation could do to his reputation and businesses. And if he refuses, then we proceed with our defense as planned. We present everything we've learned about his pattern of behavior, his money laundering operation, his technical accomplice who's now conveniently missing. We create enough reasonable doubt to get Daniel acquitted. I hope you're right, Rachel said, squeezing her sister's hand, for both your sakes. The next morning, Rose was awakened by her phone ringing. It was Roberts. Mrs. Parker, he said, his voice urgent. Something's happened. Can you come to my office immediately? What is it? Rose asked, already getting out of bed. Is it Daniel? Is he all right? Daniel's fine. It's about the case. I can't discuss it over the phone. I'll be there in half an hour, Rose promised. The October morning was crisp as Rose hurried to the bus stop. She had called Rachel from the bathroom while getting ready, asking her to meet at Roberts's office. Whatever was happening, Rose wanted her sister there for support. When she arrived, Rachel was already waiting outside the building. Together, they made their way to Roberts's office on the third floor. Roberts looked like he hadn't slept. His hair was disheveled, his tie askew, but his eyes were alert, even excited. Thank you for coming so quickly, he said, closing the office door behind them. We've had a development, a significant one. What kind of development? Rose asked, taking a seat beside Rachel. Roberts opened a drawer and removed a flash drive. This was delivered to my office this morning by courier. No return address, no note, just this. He inserted the drive into his computer and turned the screen so Rose and Rachel could see. A video began to play. It showed Richard Stone and another man, younger, with dark-rimmed glasses and an anxious expression, sitting in what appeared to be Stone's office. Is that? Rose began. William Tanner, Roberts confirmed. Watch. In the video, Stone was speaking in a low, intense voice. The Parker frame is complete. All the evidence is in place, the transactions, the account documentation, the video footage. The police have everything they need for an airtight case. Tanner nodded nervously. And my part in this is done? I can go now, like we agreed. Stone smiled coldly. Not quite yet, Will. We need to make sure the case proceeds as planned. The trial starts Monday. Once Parker's convicted, you'll receive the rest of your payment and your new identity documents. Until then, you stay in the safe house. But you promised after this one I could leave, start fresh somewhere else. This is the fifth partner you've had me frame. I never signed up for a career in fraud." Stone's expression hardened. "You signed up for whatever I tell you signed up for. Or have you forgotten our arrangement? The evidence I have that could send you to prison for the rest of your life." Tanner looked down. "I haven't forgotten." "Good. Then do as you're told. Stay at the safe house, speak to no one. When Parker is convicted, you get your freedom and your money. Until then, you're still mine." The video ended, the screen freezing on Stone's cold smile. Rose stared at the image, her heart pounding. "This is it. This is proof of the frame-up, proof that Daniel is innocent." Roberts nodded, his expression cautious but hopeful. "It certainly appears to be." Stone and Tanner explicitly discussing framing Daniel, mentioning that this is the fifth such operation. If this recording is authentic, it's the smoking gun we've been looking for. "Is there any way to verify its authenticity?" Rachel asked. "My expert is examining it now," Roberts replied, "but preliminary analysis suggests it hasn't been tampered with. The metadata shows it was recorded just 2 days after Daniel's arrest." "Who sent it?" Rose wondered. "Tanner himself?" "Possibly," Roberts acknowledged. "If he's being held against his will in this safe house Stone mentioned, he might have found a way to release this as insurance. Or someone else in Stone's organization might have decided to turn on him." "Can we use this in court?" Rose asked, hope rising within her. "Absolutely. I've already filed a motion to introduce it as new evidence. Given its direct relevance to the case and the fact that it wasn't available until now, the judge should allow it." "And the charges against Daniel?" Rachel prompted. "I've contacted the prosecutor's office," Roberts said, allowing himself a small smile. "Let's just say they're reviewing the case with new interest. This video doesn't just exonerate Daniel. It implicates Stone in multiple fraud schemes, coercion, and possibly kidnapping if Tanner is being held against his will." Rose felt tears of relief forming in her eyes. After months of fighting, of investigating, of refusing to give up, they finally had the proof they needed. Daniel would be free. "There's something else," Roberts added, his expression turning serious again. "Something you should know, Mrs. Parker. The timing of this video's arrival, it's curious, to say the least." "What do you mean?" Rose asked. "It arrived the morning after your meeting with Stone," Roberts explained. "A meeting I didn't know about until the prosecutor mentioned it to me this morning." Rose felt Rachel's questioning gaze on her, but kept her focus on Roberts. "You think Stone sent the video? Why would he incriminate himself?" "I don't think he sent it directly," Roberts clarified, "but your confrontation may have set something in motion. Perhaps Stone decided Tanner had become a liability and was preparing to eliminate him. Tanner might have sensed this and released the video as protection, or someone else in Stone's organization, learning of your accusations, decided to act as a whistleblower." Rose considered this possibility. She had told Stone she had information about Tanner, implying she knew about his role in the fraud. Had that conversation somehow led to this video being released? "Whatever the reason," Roberts continued, "this video changes everything. The prosecutor is considering dropping the charges against Daniel entirely. And the FBI has been notified about Stone's activities." "When can Daniel come home?" Rose asked, the question that mattered most to her. "If the charges are dropped, he could be released as early as tomorrow," Roberts replied. "It's all moving very quickly now." Rose closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself to feel the full weight of relief. Her son would be free. Their nightmare was ending. But as she opened her eyes, a new worry formed. What about Stone? If he learns about the video, that we have proof of his crimes. "The authorities are already moving to secure evidence from Stone Enterprises," Roberts assured her. "Search warrants are being prepared as we speak. Stone won't have time to destroy evidence or flee." "And Tanner?" Rachel asked. "If he's being held somewhere against his will?" "The FBI will make finding him a priority," Roberts said. "The video mentions a safe house, which gives them somewhere to start looking." As they left the office, Rose felt both elated and unsettled. They had won. Daniel would be cleared, Stone would face justice. But there was still a sense of unfinished business, of loose ends. Who had sent the video? Why now? And what would Stone do when he discovered his carefully constructed criminal enterprise was crumbling? That evening, Rose received a call from an unknown number. Cautious after everything that had happened, she almost didn't answer, but something compelled her to press the accept button. Hello? Mrs. Parker. The voice was familiar, though Rose couldn't immediately place it. It's William Tanner. We haven't met, but you know who I am. Rose sat down abruptly, her heart racing. Mr. Tanner, yes, I know who you are. Where are you? Are you safe? A bitter laugh came through the phone. Safe? No, not particularly. But I'm free, which is something. I'm calling to tell you that I sent the video to your lawyer. You did? Thank you. It's going to help free my son. That's why I sent it, Tanner replied. Your son is innocent, Mrs. Parker. Just like Mercer was innocent. And Rodriguez, and Chen, and Levine. I helped frame all of them, and I've lived with that guilt for years. Why did you do it? Rose asked, genuinely curious. Why help Stone commit these crimes? There was a long pause. It started small. I worked at your son's accounting firm when Stone approached me. He said he needed help with some creative accounting for his businesses. Offered me a lot of money, more than I'd make in 5 years at the firm. I knew it wasn't entirely legal, but I told myself it was just bending the rules, not breaking them. But it went beyond that, Rose prompted when Tanner fell silent. Yes, he admitted. Once Stone had me commit that first criminal act, he owned me, threatened to expose me if I didn't continue helping him. Each job became bigger, more elaborate. By the time we framed your son, I was creating fake transaction records, manipulating video footage, setting up offshore accounts. I was in too deep to get out. What changed? Why help Daniel now? Your visit to Stone, Tanner revealed. He called me afterward, told me what you'd said, what you knew. He was agitated, said you were a loose end that needed to be tied up. I knew what that meant. And I knew if he was willing to harm you, I was expendable too. Rose felt a chill. Rachel had been right to worry about her safety after confronting Stone. So I ran, Tanner continued. Grabbed the video. I'd been secretly recording our meetings for months as insurance and disappeared. Sent copies to your lawyer, to the FBI, to a few trusted journalists. Made sure that if anything happened to me, Stone would still go down. Where are you now? Rose asked. The authorities are looking for you. You could be a key witness against Stone. Somewhere Stone won't find me, Tanner replied vaguely. And yes, I know the FBI wants to talk to me. I'll turn myself in eventually. But I needed to make sure the video was taken seriously first, that your son would be released. He will be, Rose assured him. The prosecutor is dropping the charges, and Stone will face justice for what he's done. Good, Tanner said, sounding genuinely relieved. Mrs. Parker, I know this doesn't make up for my part in all this. I helped Stone destroy lives, including your son's. I can't undo that harm. But I hope the video helps set things right, at least for Daniel. It does, Rose said softly. And your testimony could help the others too, Mercer, Rodriguez. Give them back their reputations, their lives. I hope so, Tanner replied. I have to go now, but I wanted you to know why I sent the video. Your courage in confronting Stone. It made me find my own courage. Thank you for that. Before Rose could respond, the line went dead. She sat holding the phone for a long moment, processing what she had learned. Tanner, motivated by fear but also by conscience, had provided the evidence they needed. Her confrontation with Stone, risky as it had been, had set in motion the chain of events that would free Daniel. Rose looked at the photograph of James on the side table. We did it, she whispered to her husband's smiling face. Our boy is coming home. The next morning dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself was celebrating Daniel's imminent freedom. Rose had barely slept, too excited by the prospect of bringing her son home after months in jail. Roberts had called late the previous night with the news. The prosecutor had officially dropped all charges against Daniel Parker. The evidence in the video, combined with the growing body of evidence against Stone, had made it impossible to proceed with the case. He'll be processed and released tomorrow morning, Roberts had told her, around 10 a.m. if all goes smoothly. Rose had immediately called Rachel, who had insisted on accompanying her to the jail. I'll bring my car, she had offered. Daniel shouldn't have to take the bus on his first day of freedom. Now, as they waited in the jail's reception area, Rose felt a mixture of emotions, joy, relief, lingering anger at what Stone had put them through, and profound gratitude that the nightmare was finally ending. "Mrs. Parker?" A clerk appeared at the desk. "Your son's release is being processed now. Should be about 20 more minutes." "Thank you," Rose replied, her voice thick with emotion. Rachel squeezed her hand. "You did it, Rose. You never gave up on him." "We did it," Rose corrected. "I couldn't have gotten through this without you." They sat in silence for a few more minutes. Then Rachel asked, "Have you heard anything more about Stone?" Rose nodded. "Roberts called this morning before we left. Stone was arrested at his office yesterday afternoon. The FBI executed search warrants on all his businesses simultaneously. They're still going through the evidence, but Roberts says they've already found significant documentation of money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud." "What about Tanner?" "Still missing as far as I know. He called me last night." Rachel's eyes widened. "He what? Why didn't you tell me?" "It was late and I was processing everything," Rose explained. "He confirmed he sent the video, said my confronting Stone made him realize he was in danger too. That's why he ran." "Why he sent the video to Roberts?" "So your crazy plan to confront Stone actually worked," Rachel marveled. "You scared him enough that his accomplice turned on him." "I guess so," Rose acknowledged, "though I didn't anticipate that particular outcome." Their conversation was interrupted by a door opening at the far end of the room. Daniel appeared, escorted by a guard. He was dressed in the same clothes he had been wearing when arrested, his face thinner than Rose remembered, but his eyes bright as he scanned the room and found her. "Mom," he called, breaking into a run as soon as the guard removed his handcuffs. Rose met him halfway, engulfing him in a fierce hug that contained all the love, all the worry, all the determination of the past months. They clung to each other, both crying unashamedly. "You did it," Daniel whispered. "You saved me." "I told you I would," Rose replied, stroking his hair as she had when he was a child. "I promised." Rachel joined them, wrapping her arms around them both. "Welcome back, nephew." When they finally separated, Daniel wiped his eyes and looked around the reception area as if seeing it for the first time. "I can't believe I'm really free, that it's really over." "It's over," Rose confirmed. "The charges have been dropped completely. Your name is cleared, and Stone is the one behind bars now." Daniel's expression turned serious. "Roberts told me what you did, confronting Stone, finding his other victims, uncovering his whole operation. Mom, that was incredibly dangerous." "It was necessary," Rose said simply, "and worth every risk." As they walked out of the jail into the bright autumn sunshine, Daniel took a deep breath of free air. "What happens now?" "Now?" Rose slipped her arm through his. "Now we go home. We rest, we heal, and then we rebuild our lives one day at a time." Daniel nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "Home. That sounds perfect." As they approached Rachel's car, Rose glanced back at the jail one last time. For months it had represented her worst fear, that Daniel would be convicted, would spend years of his life in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Now, walking away with her son beside her, Rose felt a sense of closure. The nightmare was over. Justice, hard won and dearly fought for, had prevailed, and a mother's love had proven stronger than all the money, all the power, all the scheming that Richard Stone could muster. What would you do if your loved one was wrongfully accused? Share your thoughts in the comments. 6 months had passed since Daniel Parker walked out of jail a free man. Spring had arrived, bringing new life to the city, trees budding in the parks, flowers blooming in window boxes, and a fresh start for the Parker family. Rose sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold beside her as she sorted through the mail. Most were ordinary bills and advertisements, but one envelope stood out, a thick cream-colored one with the logo of Marshall & Associates accounting firm embossed in the corner. "Daniel," she called toward the bedroom where her son was getting dressed for work. "There's a letter from your old firm." Daniel emerged, adjusting his tie, a new one Rose had bought him to celebrate his first week back at work. Not at his old firm, but at a smaller, more progressive accounting office that had reached out after his exoneration made the news. "From Marshall's?" he asked, surprised. "They haven't exactly been beating down my door since I was cleared." Rose handed him the envelope. Maybe they finally found their conscience. Daniel sat beside his mother, carefully opening the letter. As he read, his expression shifted from curiosity to astonishment. "It's from Mr. Marshall himself," he said, his voice quiet with disbelief. "He's offering me my old job back, with a promotion to senior accountant and a substantial raise." Rose raised her eyebrows. "After everything that happened? After they abandoned you without a second thought?" "He says they've conducted an internal review and recognized they acted hastily in terminating my employment. That my recent vindication has prompted them to, and I quote, make amends for our regrettable lack of faith in your character." Daniel looked up from the letter. "He also mentions that several clients specifically requested me as their accountant." "How generous of them," Rose remarked, not bothering to hide her sarcasm. "Now that you've been proven innocent and Stone has been exposed, they're happy to welcome you back with open arms." Daniel smiled at his mother's protective tone. "To be fair, the evidence against me looked pretty damning. I can't entirely blame them for believing it." "I didn't believe it," Rose pointed out, "and I saw the same evidence they did." "Yes, but you're my mother. You know my heart." Daniel reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "They only knew my work." Rose squeezed back, her initial indignation softening. "So, are you going to accept?" Daniel folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. "I don't think so. I'm happy at Montgomery Accounting. They hired me when my name still had a cloud over it. They took a chance on me when no one else would. That means something." Pride swelled in Rose's chest. Her son's sense of loyalty, his appreciation for those who stood by him during difficult times, these were qualities that defined him far more than his professional skills. "I think that's the right decision," she said. "Though the raise would have been nice." Daniel grinned. "Who says I can't negotiate a raise at Montgomery? After all, I'm now in demand." They laughed together, enjoying the moment of lightness. Such moments had become more frequent lately as the shadows of their ordeal gradually receded. "I'd better get going," Daniel said, glancing at his watch. "Don't want to be late. We're having lunch together still, right? The little Italian place near your office?" Rose nodded. After her extended leave of absence during Daniel's case, she had returned to her job at the doctor's office, where her employer had welcomed her back warmly. 1 o'clock. I'm looking forward to it." As Daniel grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door, Rose called after him, "Have a good day, son. I love you." "Love you too, Mom," he replied with the easy affection that had always characterized their relationship. After Daniel left, Rose remained at the kitchen table, reflecting on how much had changed in the past 6 months. The immediate aftermath of Daniel's release had been a whirlwind of media attention, legal proceedings against Stone, and the gradual process of rebuilding their lives. Richard Stone's arrest had made headlines across the country. The respected businessman, philanthropist, and community leader revealed as the mastermind behind a sophisticated money laundering and fraud operation. Investigators had uncovered evidence far beyond what Rose and Roberts had pieced together. Shell companies, offshore accounts, connections to organized crime, and a pattern of fraud stretching back over a decade. The case had grown even more sensational when William Tanner had finally turned himself in to the authorities 3 weeks after sending the video that freed Daniel. Tanner had provided testimony detailing Stone's entire operation, including the technical methods used to frame innocent partners. In exchange for his cooperation, Tanner had received a reduced sentence, 3 years instead of the potential 20 he might have faced. James Mercer and Peter Rodriguez had come forward as well, their stories corroborating Tanner's testimony and Daniel's experience. With multiple victims telling the same story, backed by Tanner's insider knowledge and the mountain of evidence seized from Stone's businesses, the case against Stone had become overwhelming. Stone himself had maintained his innocence initially, hiring a team of high-priced lawyers to fight the charges. But as more evidence emerged and more accomplices turned state's witness, his defense had crumbled. Faced with the prospect of a lengthy trial and an almost certain conviction, Stone had eventually accepted a plea deal, 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The final blow to Stone's empire had come when investigators discovered evidence suggesting Sarah Chen's fatal car accident had not been an accident at all. Stone had arranged her death when she began asking too many questions, threatening to expose his operation. That murder charge alone would have sent him to prison for life. The plea deal, harsh as it seemed, had actually spared him a much worse fate. For Daniel, the process of rebuilding had been both challenging and rewarding. His legal exoneration was just the beginning. There were practical matters to address: finding new employment, re-establishing his professional reputation, dealing with the financial impact of months without income. There were also emotional wounds to heal: the trauma of imprisonment, the betrayal by someone he had trusted, the lingering anger over how easily the system had accepted his guilt. Rose had watched with pride as her son faced each challenge with grace and resilience. He had given interviews to clear his name, not out of vengeance, but to reclaim his story. He had sought therapy to process his trauma, acknowledging that strength sometimes meant asking for help. He had even spoken at a conference on financial fraud, using his experience to help others protect themselves from similar schemes. Most moving to Rose had been Daniel's work with a nonprofit organization that helped exonerated individuals reintegrate into society. Having experienced firsthand the challenges of rebuilding a life after wrongful accusation, Daniel had become passionate about supporting others in similar situations. He volunteered evenings and weekends, offering both practical assistance with job searches and emotional support from someone who truly understood. For Rose herself, the aftermath had brought unexpected changes as well. Her investigation into Stone's operation had revealed skills she hadn't known she possessed: research abilities, analytical thinking, a talent for connecting seemingly unrelated pieces of information. Roberts had half-jokingly suggested she consider a career as a private investigator. "You've got a natural talent for it," he had told her during their final meeting, when the last paperwork clearing Daniel had been completed. "Better instincts than most professionals I know." Rose had laughed off the suggestion initially, but the idea had taken root. At 65, most people were thinking about retirement, not new careers. But Rose had never been one to follow conventional expectations. The work she had done to save Daniel had awakened something in her, a sense of purpose beyond her role as a mother, a desire to use her newly discovered talents to help others. So while continuing her job at the doctor's office, Rose had begun taking online courses in investigation techniques, computer research, and legal procedures. She had connected with a network of advocates for the wrongfully accused, offering her services pro bono to families navigating the same nightmare she and Daniel had experienced. It wasn't a new career exactly, more a purposeful avocation. But it brought her satisfaction to know that her painful experience could be transformed into something that helped others, that the skills forged in the crucible of fighting for Daniel could now be tools for bringing justice to others who had been denied it. The sound of the apartment door opening interrupted Rose's reflections. She turned, surprised, as Daniel walked back in. "Forgot my phone," he explained, grabbing it from the counter. He paused, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Everything okay, Mom?" Rose smiled. "Everything's fine. Just thinking about how far we've come." Daniel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Pretty amazing journey, huh? From that courtroom where you stood up and demanded to defend me yourself to here. Normal life again. Better than normal, maybe." "Better than normal," Rose agreed. "Because we know now what truly matters, and how much we can overcome together." Daniel crossed the kitchen and planted a kiss on her forehead. "That we do. See you at lunch." After he left again, Rose returned to her mail sorting, but her mind remained on their journey. From the darkest moment of their lives had come unexpected gifts, deeper bonds, new purpose, profound gratitude for the simple joy of being together in freedom and safety. The road hadn't been easy, and there were still difficult days. Daniel sometimes woke from nightmares about his time in jail. Rose occasionally found herself looking over her shoulder, a habit born from months of feeling threatened. But these shadows were gradually receding, making way for the light of their new beginning. Rose thought about the others whose lives had been upended by Stone's schemes. James Mercer had been officially exonerated, his criminal record expunged. He remained in Millfield, continuing his work as a teacher, but with the cloud of suspected criminality finally lifted from his name. Peter Rodriguez had been reunited with his family, his reputation restored. He had even been offered his old position at Weatherby Capital, though, like Daniel, he had chosen to remain with the smaller firm that had given him a chance when others wouldn't. Even Tanner, despite his role in the fraud, had shown a capacity for redemption. His testimony had been crucial in bringing Stone to justice and clearing the names of his victims. He would serve his time, but emerge with the possibility of rebuilding his life, having made what amends he could for the harm he had caused. The doorbell rang, pulling Rose from her thoughts. She wasn't expecting anyone. Cautious habits died hard, and she checked the peephole before opening the door. "Rachel," she exclaimed, seeing her sister's smiling face, "this is a nice surprise. Come in." Rachel entered carrying a small gift bag. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Plus, I have something for you." They settled in the living room, and Rachel handed Rose the gift bag. Inside was a small wooden plaque with an inscription, "A mother's love can move mountains." Rose ran her fingers over the engraved words, emotion tightening her throat. "I saw it in a shop window and immediately thought of you," Rachel explained. "Because that's exactly what you did, Rose. You moved mountains to save Daniel." "We all did," Rose replied softly. "You, Roberts, even Tanner in the end." "It wasn't just me." "But you were the force that drove it all," Rachel insisted. "Your belief in Daniel, your determination to uncover the truth no matter what, that's what made everything else possible." Rose placed the plaque on the coffee table, positioning it so she could see the words clearly. "Thank you. It's perfect." "So," Rachel said, changing the subject, "how are the plans coming for Daniel's birthday dinner next week?" Rose brightened. "Everything's set. The restaurant has the private room reserved for 7 o'clock. I've invited his new colleagues, a few friends who stood by him through everything, and of course, you and Roberts." "Roberts is coming?" Rachel asked, surprised. Rose nodded. "He and Daniel have stayed in touch. I think they genuinely like each other, now that their relationship isn't defined by legal crisis." "And the surprise you mentioned. Did you decide what to get him?" Rose's eyes twinkled. "I did, and I think he's going to love it. Remember how before all this happened, Daniel always talked about wanting to visit his father's hometown in Michigan, to see where James grew up, connect with that part of his heritage?" Rachel nodded. "He's wanted to do that for years, but never had the time or money." "Well, I've arranged everything. Plane tickets, a rental car, accommodations at a lovely bed and breakfast. Plus, I've connected with some of James's old friends who still live there and are excited to meet Daniel, share stories about his father's childhood." "Rose, that's perfect," Rachel said warmly. "A chance to connect with his father's legacy after coming so close to losing his own future. It's poetic." "That's what I thought," Rose agreed. "After everything that's happened, it feels right to revisit our roots, to remember where we came from even as we move forward." They chatted for a while longer about Rachel's work, about neighborhood news, about the upcoming summer plans. Normal, everyday topics that once might have seemed mundane, but now represented the precious gift of ordinary life reclaimed. When Rachel left, Rose returned to the kitchen to finish sorting the mail and prepare for her day. Her gaze fell on the photograph of James that still held a place of honor in their home. The same photograph Daniel had stared at during the long months of their ordeal, drawing strength from his father's memory. "We made it. James," Rose said softly to the smiling face. "Our boy is safe. He's free. He's building a good life, just like we always dreamed for him." She could almost imagine James's response, his proud smile, his gentle teasing about her becoming an amateur detective at 65, his unwavering faith in her strength. In many ways, he had been present throughout their ordeal, a guiding spirit whose love continued to shape their lives long after his physical presence was gone. Rose's phone chimed with a message from her boss, reminding her of a staff meeting that afternoon. Real life, with its mundane responsibilities and small pleasures, continued to unfold, and that itself was a victory. The triumph of normalcy over chaos, of justice over deception, of love over all the forces that had threatened to tear their family apart. 1 week later, Rose stood in the private dining room of Salvatore's, watching as guests arrived for Daniel's birthday dinner. The restaurant had been one of their special occasion spots before, affordable enough for occasional splurges, but nice enough to feel celebratory. The owner, Mr. Salvatore himself, had refused to accept payment for the private room when Rose made the reservation. "What you did for your son," he had told her, his Italian accent thick with emotion. "It reminds me of my own mother." Such courage deserves to be honored. The room is my gift to you both." Now, the space was filled with the people who had supported Daniel through the darkest chapter of his life. Rachel, of course, Roberts and his wife, Daniel's new boss and several colleagues, friends who had visited him in jail and stood by him when others disappeared. Even a few clients who had followed him from his old firm to Montgomery Accounting, loyal to the man they trusted with their finances. Daniel hadn't arrived yet. Rachel's husband was bringing him, having invented a pretext of wanting Daniel's advice about retirement investments over dinner. The surprise gathering had been carefully planned, with everyone instructed to arrive by 6:45 for a 7:00 reveal. "He has no idea?" Roberts asked, joining Rose by the window where she watched for Daniel's arrival. "None at all," Rose confirmed. "He thinks we're having a quiet dinner at home tomorrow on his actual birthday." Roberts smiled, shaking his head slightly. "He's lucky to have you, Mrs. Parker." "Rose, please," she corrected gently. "After everything we've been through together, I think we can dispense with the formalities." "Rose," Roberts agreed, "and you must call me Thomas." "Thomas it is." Rose studied the lawyer who had become something of a friend. "I never properly thanked you for everything you did for Daniel, for believing in his innocence when the evidence seemed so damning." "You did all the hard work," Thomas demurred. "I just helped present it in court." "You did more than that," Rose insisted. "You listened when others wouldn't. You were open to possibilities beyond the obvious conclusions. Not every lawyer would have been so receptive to a mother's investigation." Thomas looked embarrassed but pleased by the praise. "Well, I've learned to trust mothers' instincts. They're usually right about their children." He paused, then added, "I've been meaning to tell you, I've taken on another case. Similar situation, young woman accused of embezzlement. The evidence looks solid, but her family insists she's innocent. Before meeting you, I might have pushed for a plea deal. Now, I'm looking deeper, asking different questions." Rose felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Their ordeal had changed not just their own lives, but rippled outward, influencing how this lawyer approached his cases, potentially saving another innocent person from the fate Daniel had narrowly escaped. "They're here," Rachel called from her position near the door. "Everyone get ready." The room quieted as footsteps approached down the hallway. Rose heard Daniel's voice, then Rachel's husband responding. The door swung open, and Daniel stepped in, still mid-sentence about investment strategies. "Surprise!" everyone shouted in unison. Daniel froze, his expression shifting from confusion to amazement as he took in the decorated room, the smiling faces, the banner reading, "Happy Birthday, Daniel." "What?" he began, then spotted Rose. "Mom, did you do this?" Rose crossed the room to embrace him. "Happy birthday, son. A little early, but I thought you deserved a proper celebration this year." Daniel hugged her tight, visibly moved. "Thank you. I don't even have words." The evening that followed was everything Rose had hoped for. Good food, warm conversation, genuine celebration of not just Daniel's birthday, but his restored freedom and reputation. Toasts were offered, gifts presented, stories shared, both humorous and heartfelt. When dessert had been served, a towering chocolate cake with Daniel's name in elegant script, Rose stood and gently tapped her glass for attention. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," she began. "This past year has been the most difficult our family has ever faced. There were moments when I feared this day might never come, that we might be celebrating Daniel's birthday through prison visiting hours instead of together in freedom." A somber hush fell over the room as everyone recalled how close they had come to that reality. "But we're here," Rose continued, her voice strengthening. "We're here because truth is stronger than deception, because justice, however delayed, can still prevail, and because love, the love of family, of friends, of everyone in this room, can sustain us through even the darkest times." She turned to face Daniel directly. "Son, watching you rebuild your life these past months, with dignity, with grace, without bitterness, has been the greatest privilege of my life. You faced an ordeal that would have broken many, and you emerged not just intact, but somehow stronger, more compassionate, more determined to help others who walk the path you traveled." Daniel's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he listened. "I have one more gift for you," Rose said, reaching into her purse and withdrawing an envelope. "Something I've wanted to give you for a long time. Daniel accepted the envelope, opening it carefully. Inside were the plane tickets, the rental car reservation, the bed and breakfast booking, and a handwritten list of his father's childhood friends who were eager to meet him. "Michigan?" he asked, puzzled at first, then understanding dawned. "Dad's hometown?" Rose nodded. "It's time you saw where half your roots lie, where your father grew up, played, dreamed of his future. The people there still remember him. They want to meet his son, share their memories." "Mom," Daniel's voice broke. He stood and wrapped her in a fierce hug. "It's perfect. Absolutely perfect." Applause broke out around the table, though few understood the full significance of the gift. It wasn't just about visiting James's hometown. It was about reclaiming the connection to the past that had almost been severed by Stone's actions. It was about honoring the father who had shaped Daniel's character, whose integrity had passed to his son and ultimately saved him when that integrity was questioned. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Daniel and Rose found a quiet moment together near the window where she had awaited his arrival. "Happy?" she asked, though his face already gave her the answer. "Happier than I've been in a long time," he confirmed, "not just because of the party or the trip, though both are amazing, but because of this." He gestured to include the room, the departing guests, the entire evening. Community, connection, belonging. For a while there, I thought I'd lost it all forever. "It was never lost," Rose said softly. "Just temporarily obscured. The people who truly know you never doubted you." Daniel nodded, reflective. "You know what I think about sometimes? That day in court when you stood up and declared you'd defend me yourself. Everyone thought you were crazy. The judge, the prosecutor, probably even me a little bit." Rose chuckled. "It wasn't my most conventional moment, but it was exactly what was needed," Daniel insisted. "That kind of, I don't know what to call it except fierce love. The kind that doesn't care about protocols or probabilities or what people might think. The kind that just acts because someone you love is in danger and nothing else matters." "That's what parents do," Rose said simply. "We protect our children, no matter what." "Not all parents," Daniel corrected gently. "Some would have accepted what they were told, believed the evidence, maybe even cut ties to avoid the shame. You never wavered, not for a second." "Because I know you," Rose replied. "I know your heart." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching as the last guests said their goodbyes, as Rachel supervised the packing of leftover cake, as the restaurant staff discreetly began clearing tables. "So," Daniel said eventually, "Michigan in 2 weeks?" "Michigan in 2 weeks," Rose confirmed. "I thought we could rent a car, make it a road trip, see some sights along the way." "We," Daniel repeated. "You're coming too?" Rose looked at him surprised. "Of course. Unless, would you prefer to go alone?" Daniel shook his head firmly. "No, I want you there. It wouldn't be right without you. Dad's story belongs to both of us." Relief and joy mingled in Rose's heart. "Then we'll go together, make new memories while honoring the old ones." As they left the restaurant, stepping into the cool spring evening, Rose felt a sense of completion, of things coming full circle. Their ordeal had begun with a mother's desperate stand in a courtroom, declaring her son's innocence against all evidence to the contrary. It had ended with that same mother and son, bonds strengthened by adversity, preparing to honor the man whose legacy lived on in both of them. Justice had been served. Truth had prevailed. Love had conquered fear, deception, and the machinery of a system too willing to accept appearances over reality. And now they were free to write the next chapter of their story. Together. "Ready to go home?" Daniel asked, offering his arm. Rose took it, smiling up at her son, her brave, resilient, compassionate son who had faced the worst and emerged still kind, still hopeful, still himself. "Ready," she replied. "Let's go home." As they walked toward Rachel's waiting car, Rose glanced up at the night sky, at the stars glimmering above the city lights. Somewhere, she liked to think, James was watching, proud of the son he had helped create and the wife who had never stopped fighting for their family. The journey hadn't ended, not really. There would be new challenges, new joys, new chapters in their lives, but they would face them together, armed with the knowledge that they could overcome anything, a mother's love, a son's integrity, truth that refused to stay buried. In the end, these simple, profound forces had proven stronger than all the money, power, and deception arrayed against them. And that, Rose reflected as she took her seat in the car beside her son, was the greatest victory of all. Can a mother's love truly move mountains? Share your thoughts in the comments below. 3 years had passed since that fateful day in the courtroom when Rose Parker had stood up and declared she would defend her son herself. 3 years since their lives had been upended by Richard Stone's elaborate scheme. 3 years of healing, rebuilding, and ultimately thriving in the aftermath of injustice. On this particular autumn morning, Rose sat on a park bench, watching fallen leaves dance across the pathway. The park was quiet on weekdays, just a few mothers with young children, elderly couples taking slow walks, and the occasional jogger passing by. It was one of Rose's favorite places to think, to reflect on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The Michigan trip with Daniel had been everything she had hoped for, a chance to connect with James's roots, to hear stories about his childhood from people who had known him, to walk the streets he had walked as a boy. They had returned with photographs, mementos, and most importantly, a deeper sense of their family history, their identity beyond the trauma they had endured. Daniel had continued to flourish at Montgomery Accounting, receiving a promotion to manager the previous year. His volunteer work with exonerated individuals had evolved into a formal nonprofit organization, Second Chance Financial Services, which provided financial counseling, job placement assistance, and small business loans to those rebuilding their lives after wrongful conviction. Money shouldn't be an obstacle to reclaiming your life, Daniel often said when interviewed about the organization. These people have already lost enough. Rose smiled, remembering how proud she had been watching Daniel on the local news, explaining the mission of Second Chance with passion and conviction. Her son had transformed his pain into purpose, his ordeal into opportunity for others. In doing so, he had not just recovered from Stone's scheme, he had transcended it. As for Rose herself, she had indeed embraced the investigative skills discovered during Daniel's case. After completing several courses in legal procedures and investigation techniques, she had started a small consulting practice, working alongside attorneys representing individuals who claimed wrongful accusation. Her reputation for thoroughness, for seeing connections others missed, for asking the right questions had grown steadily. She had even testified as an expert witness in 2 cases, helping secure acquittals for clients who might otherwise have been convicted on circumstantial evidence. At 68, when most of her peers were fully retired, Rose was busier than ever, and happier too. The work energized her, gave her a sense of purpose beyond herself, and the knowledge that her efforts were preventing others from experiencing what Daniel had suffered made every late night worth it. Richard Stone remained in federal prison, his appeals exhausted, his empire dismantled. The money recovered from his various accounts and businesses had been distributed among his victims, not just his former partners, but clients who had been unwittingly involved in his money laundering schemes. It wasn't enough to fully compensate for the damage he had caused, but it was something tangible, a form of justice beyond his incarceration. William Tanner had served 2 years of his 3-year sentence before being released on parole. True to his word, he had cooperated fully with authorities, helping unravel Stone's complex financial web and testifying in cases against Stone's other accomplices. Upon his release, he had reached out to Daniel, offering a formal apology for his role in the frame-up. Daniel, in a gesture that demonstrated his character, had not only accepted the apology, but offered Tanner a position with Second Chance, reasoning that someone with direct experience of both sides of the justice system could bring valuable insight to their work. "Everyone deserves an opportunity to make amends," Daniel had said when Rose questioned his decision. "To be more than the worst thing they've done." The sound of footsteps on the pathway drew Rose from her reflections. She looked up to see Judge Harrison approaching, his silver hair now fully white, his gait slightly slower, but his posture still dignified. The judge had retired the previous year after 35 years on the bench, his final case being another wrongful accusation that Rose had helped unravel. "Mrs. Parker," he greeted her with a warm smile, I thought that might be you. Mind if I join you? Please, Rose replied, gesturing to the empty space beside her. And it's Rose, remember? Rose, the judge corrected himself, settling onto the bench. I forget sometimes. Old habits. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching a squirrel dart across the path with an acorn clutched in its mouth. I was just thinking about you this morning, Judge Harrison said eventually. I saw the announcement about the Justice Reform Committee. Congratulations on your appointment. Rose smiled. The committee, established by the state governor to review and improve procedures for evaluating evidence in financial crime cases, had been a long-time goal of hers. Her appointment as a civilian advisor, alongside legal and financial experts, represented recognition of her work since Daniel's case. Thank you, she said. It's an honor to be included, though I suspect your recommendation played a significant role in my selection. The judge waved away her suggestion modestly. The committee is fortunate to have your perspective. You've seen firsthand how easily evidence can be manipulated, how readily the system accepts a convenient narrative without digging deeper. That's what I hope to change, Rose agreed, to make sure other families don't have to fight as hard as we did for the truth to be heard. Judge Harrison nodded thoughtfully. You know, in all my years on the bench, I never forgot that day when you stood up in my courtroom and declared you would defend your son yourself. I thought you were, forgive me, a desperate mother in denial. I was desperate, Rose acknowledged with a small smile, but not in denial. No, the judge agreed. You were the only one seeing clearly while the rest of us were blinded by seemingly perfect evidence. It changed how I approached every case that came before me afterward, made me more willing to question, to look beyond the surface, to remember that behind every file is a human being whose life hangs in the balance. His words warmed Rose's heart. The ripple effects of their ordeal continued to spread outward, influencing not just their own lives, but the lives of countless others who would never know the role Daniel's case had played in their justice. How is Daniel? The judge asked. Still running that nonprofit? Thriving, Rose replied proudly. Second Chance just received a major foundation grant to expand their services nationwide. And on a personal note, he's engaged to be married next spring. Her name is Eliza. She's a social worker he met through his volunteer work. She's wonderful, compassionate, intelligent, with a great sense of humor. That's excellent news, the judge said warmly. Please extend my congratulations. It does my heart good to see life come full circle like this, from that frightened young man in my courtroom to someone building a meaningful future, helping others. I'll tell him, Rose promised. He still speaks of you with great respect. Says you were the first person in authority who was willing to listen, to consider the possibility of his innocence. The judge looked embarrassed but pleased. I just did my job, eventually. Which is more than many others did, Rose pointed out gently. They chatted a while longer about mutual acquaintances, about the judge's retirement plans, about Rose's upcoming speaking engagement at a conference on wrongful convictions. As the conversation drew to a natural close, Judge Harrison turned to her with a more serious expression. There's something I've wanted to ask you for a long time, he said. Something I've never quite understood. What's that? Rose prompted. How did you do it? How did you maintain such absolute faith in your son's innocence when all the evidence pointed to his guilt? How did you find the courage to stand up against the entire system, against overwhelming odds? Rose considered the question carefully. It was one she had been asked many times over the years, by journalists, by other families facing similar battles, by the students in the criminology classes where she occasionally guest lectured. Her answer had evolved with time and reflection, becoming both simpler and more profound. I knew my son, she said at last, not just his habits or his history, but his heart, the essence of who he is. And that knowledge was stronger than any evidence, any logical argument, any expert testimony. Some bonds go beyond what can be documented or proven in court. They're written in something deeper than ink and paper. The judge nodded slowly. A mother's love. Yes, Rose agreed. But it's more than just emotional attachment. It's a kind of knowing that exists between certain people, between parents and children, sometimes, between partners who have shared decades of life, between the closest of friends. A knowing that says, this is who you are, and no one can convince me otherwise. I envy that certainty, the judge admitted. In my position, I was trained to question everything, to doubt, to demand proof. The world needs both, Rose suggested, those who question and those who trust. Those who follow evidence and those who follow their hearts. Justice lives in the balance between them. Judge Harrison smiled. A wise perspective. I can see why the governor wanted you on that committee. He glanced at his watch. I should be going. My grandchildren are expecting me for lunch. But it was good to see you, Rose. Truly good. You as well, Judge, Rose replied as he stood to leave. Thomas, he corrected with a smile. I'm retired now, remember? Thomas, Rose agreed. Take care. As the judge walked away, Rose remained on the bench, reflecting on their conversation. So much had changed since that desperate day in court. Lives had been rebuilt. Justice had been served, however imperfectly. Wounds had healed, leaving scars that would always be part of their story but no longer defined it. Rose's phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. Dinner at our place tonight? Eliza's making her famous lasagna, 7 p.m.? Rose smiled, typing back. Wouldn't miss it. Need me to bring anything? The reply came quickly. Just yourself. And maybe that story about Dad's first car? Eliza hasn't heard that one yet. Will do. See you at 7, Rose responded, slipping the phone back into her purse. The mention of James's old stories, the ones she had shared with Daniel throughout his childhood, reminded Rose of how our narratives shape us, connect us, sustain us through difficult times. The stories we tell about ourselves and our loved ones become a kind of armor against the world's harshness, a reminder of who we are beyond whatever challenges we currently face. Rose stood, brushing a few fallen leaves from her coat. As she walked along the winding path toward the park exit, she thought about all the families still fighting their own battles against injustice, still searching for truth, still holding on to faith in their loved ones, despite what evidence or authorities might claim. To them, she wished the strength she had found in her darkest moments, the courage to stand up when all seemed lost, the persistence to keep searching for truth when doors closed in their faces, the clarity to see beyond manufactured evidence to the heart of what mattered, and most of all, the knowledge that they were not alone, that others had walked this path before them and emerged victorious. That justice, while sometimes delayed, could still be achieved through love, determination, and unwavering belief in the truth. My friends, thank you for joining me for this true story of a mother's courage and a son's vindication. Before I end today's video, I have a question for you. What would you have done if you were in Rose's shoes? If your loved one was facing overwhelming evidence of guilt, would you have had the courage to fight the entire system? Let me know in the comments below. And if you think Rose's story was shocking, wait until you hear the next story, about a son's wickedness and abandonment towards his adopted mother after all she did for him. That video will be live soon, so make sure you don't miss it. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in honesty and compassion. Only people who support lies and manipulation would refuse to join us on this journey of uncovering truth and celebrating justice. Also, ring that notification bell so you'll know immediately when new stories are posted. Thank you again for watching. Remember, sometimes the greatest courage is simply refusing to accept injustice, even when you stand alone. See you next time at Virtuous Stories. We love you.